I will invite the rector of the university for opening the conference. We are at a stage that we are facing fiscal crisis. 1/3 of the countries in the globe are at the brink of default or are facing fiscal default at the moment. We also experience environmental crisis, mainly transposing to the climate change and the biodiversity collapse. And at the same time, we are facing increased inequalities between the global north and the global south, between different income groups within countries. And of course, the geopolitical pressures are increasing. And when we are facing crisis, multi-crisis, it is only natural that they are increasing. The good news is that we have our blueprint for escaping this multi-crisis. We've signed it in 2015, UN, General Assembly, September, New York, the SDGs, UN Agenda 2030, 17 SDGs, 169 targets, a very holistic, integrated framework that showcases the pathway to sustainability. And part of this pathway is the transformation of the systems that sustain our being. The energy system, the land use system, the marine use system, the socioeconomic system, the health system. This conference is about the energy system. And in particular, it's about the contribution, the potential, but also challenges of hydrogen as one of the energy sources. We need to keep in mind that the transition to a climate neutral and climate resilient energy system will be a mixture of energy sources. This mixture will be different for different countries, and hydrogen could play a crucial role. Of course, there are challenges, infrastructural challenges, cost challenges, integration with other energy sources challenges, efficiency challenges. That's why we are here, to investigate Greece's potential for hydrogen, Europe's potential for hydrogen, but very importantly, how Europe can help, facilitate, create green corridors with its neighbors, neighboring regions, and also across the world. Professor Vasilis Vardakis, Rector of the Athens University of Economics and Business, please, the floor is yours to open the conference.
Your Excellencies, honorable ministers, distinguished academics and experts, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure and honor to welcome you here to the Athens University of Economics and Business for today's high-level conference on shaping Europe's sustainable energy future and hydrogen. Your participation in this forum highlights the critical importance of international cooperation in our shared mission towards a sustainable energy future. AUEB is proud for being Greece's leading institution in the fields of economics, business, informatics, and statistics. Our commitment to academic excellence is recognized internationally through consistently high rankings and the active global engagement of our faculty and research centers. I think a key pillar of our strategic vision is the promotion of sustainability through world-class research and interdisciplinary collaboration. AUEB is honored to host the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network, the SDSN, Greece, and the corresponding SDSN Global Climate Hub, both coordinated through the research, laboratory, and socio-economic and environmental sustainability, the RECEs, founded and directed by Professor Philippe Condu. These networks are part of a broader alliance of excellence for research and innovation on I4A. The energy transition is urgent since climate change is accelerating. Shifting to clean energy sources is imperative to limit global warming, protect ecosystems, ensure public health, and decrease inequalities. The hydrogen can play a vital role to the energy transition as it enables decarbonization in hard to electrify sectors such as heavy industry, shipping, and aviation. When produced with renewable energy, that is the green hydrogen, it emits no carbon, offering a clean fuel alternative. Here at AUEB, we are committed to advancing research, policy, and innovation in these critical areas. Through forums like this, we aim to foster the exchange of knowledge and the formation of collaborative pathways towards a sustainable and climate resilient world. Our partnerships are spread around the world. I would like to thank you once again for being here today, and thank you for your commitment in this vital cause. All the best for this program.
And I want to thank you, Professor Valzakis, for your commitment to research excellence, but also outreach, national and international. It's really crucial that the leadership of a university embraces these values on which we can build our research, but also invest effort in communicating our research results to other stakeholders, the politicians, the policymakers, the businesses, the financiers, the civil society, so that impact is created and progress is made. So the first institution that is organizing this conference is the Athens University of Economics and Business. The second institution, but not in terms of order, just in terms of mentioning, is Athena Research Center, the main research center of the country, under the auspices of the Ministry of Development. So universities are under the auspices of the Ministry of Education, and research centers are under the auspices of ministries of the Ministry of Development. Athena Research Center is focusing on information technologies, communication, machine learning, and AI. And it is also one of the most successful research institutions of the country, as the Athens University of Economics and Businesses with regards to attracting research funding. Professor Yannis Emiris, a professor at the Kapodistrian University of Athens, President and Executive Director of Athena Research Center, will also share some opening remarks.
Good morning, Your Excellency, former Minister of Climate Change, Your Excellency, the Ambassador, the Rector. Thanks for the great introduction, Professor Kuduri. I'm representing here Athena Research Center, which is indeed the only research center focused on digital technology and digital science, with a big effort on transferring research to society and to economy. So innovation is part of our mission, and this is why we are under the auspices of the Ministry of Development in order to emphasize innovation and tangible results that will help the economy in various ways. Indeed, our emphasis is on digital technologies, including machine learning, artificial intelligence, computational science. But we believe that the research in these horizontal domains would have no impact if it was not related to specific applications and specific problems faced by society. One of our main focuses in terms of domains, in terms of transfer of technology, is climate change, climate monitoring, and the impact that human activities have to the environment. And this is structured around what we call a unit on sustainable development, which is headed by Professor Kuduri. So we have different groups within Athena, and one of our major groups is the unit on sustainable development. Athena Research Center is based in 3 Greek cities. Headquarters are in Athens, with a major part of our institutes and units, but we have a strong institute in Patras on industrial systems, and a strong institute in Xanthi, northern Greece, northeast, on digital culture. In Athens, we focus on data, AI, robotics, more recently. Sustainable development is one of our big groups, and we have also an incubator for startups, not only the startups of Athena, but startups from all around the country and even beyond, that helps them do their first steps, receive mentorship, legal advice, in order to be able to get into the market. I would like to say a couple of words on why digital technology is important when we study the environment and we study climate change. Because sometimes people ask the question and they find that these domains are not together all the time. We believe that they must be together because AI and computational science is today a major weapon that we have in order to address the challenges that humanity has. And I could name many, many examples, starting from forecasting to data analytics, to prediction, to monitoring, even hydrogen, which is an important new player in these energy issues, require a lot of digital technology. We recently had a European project on monitoring hydrogen factories, because as you know, they are very sensible. The infrastructure there needs close monitoring, and often monitoring that is not done by humans. So we had a project on smart maintenance combined with IoT and some robotics technology in order to monitor the factory. We had a project with a shipping company, a European project, on green shipping, and hydrogen is a major actor in the new era of providing energy to the shipping industry. Now, all of this requires strong algorithms, very powerful software, smart AI. And we know that smart AI comes at a cost, comes at a very high energy cost. So again, that poses a big challenge to us to have AI models that will not consume as much energy. Especially in the future, as you all know, it is forecasted that about half of the energy consumption will go worldwide, will go to data centers and AI training. The AI models are very costly in terms of training. So one part of our work is to find smarter algorithms that can reproduce or can create smart models, efficient AI models, without requiring so much energy, without requiring so big machines, without requiring so much data. Okay. So there is a big algorithmic challenge in reducing the energy requirements of AI in general. And last but not least, I would like to mention, as I already referred to, our efforts on innovation. We have had startups. We have had a very successful example of a startup that was acquired by Samsung 5 years ago. Right now, we do have startups in the general area of sustainability, cyclical economy, and we would like to see more, because we believe that startups are a way to promote innovation very fast and to help economy adopt new solutions that come from young scientists that try to incorporate cutting-edge research into the economy. So we have a major project together with Athens University of Economics and Business, actually coordinated by Athens University of Economics and Business, on aligning the tech transfer offices of AUEB, Athena, National Technical University of Athens, Democritus Research Center, which are major research centers and universities in Greece, I would say, in general, and we expect to create, it's called Science Agora. We expect to have it as a one-stop shop for innovation in different domains. And I guess sustainability and energy could be very well a domain of focus for Science Agora. So once again, I welcome you to this great conference. We thank all the organizers, and I expect this to be a very fruitful opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yanis. Indeed, the heart and soul of Science Agora, which is the innovation network of Greece, bringing in collaboration the most innovative research institutions and universities. The heart and soul is Professor Katerina Pramatari, who is a professor at the Athens University of Economics and Business, and we are all very proud of her. Now, the third co-organizer of this conference is the United Nations SDSM Global Climate Hub. The Global Climate Hub has a mission to create climate neutrality and climate resilience pathways until 2050 for each and every country in the world. And these are detailed enough in order to be able to implement them explicitly and accurately. And I'm going to showcase what we do in my later speech. I'm saying this to introduce Masaba Zioni, the Executive Coordinator of UNFCCC Global Innovation Hub on climate change, because with Masaba and his innovation hub at UNFCCC, we have mobilized a lot of connections and actual work and many big projects during the different COPs.
So achieving the transition toward flourishing, the future in which human and non-human systems flourish together requires the deep decarbonization of energy systems alongside the restoration and even augmentation of ecological functions. Green hydrogen produced via electrolysis can play a critical role in enabling this transformation. So first, green hydrogen offers the best way to decarbonize hard-to-abate sector, including heavy industries such as steel, cement, chemicals, and long-distance transport, shipping, and aviation. These sectors are measured with GHG emissions. Second, the deployment of clean hydrogen supports energy system resilience and flexibility. Indeed, hydrogen can serve as a long-duration energy storage mechanism, balancing intermittent renewable energy generation and stabilizing energy grid. This increases the reliability of renewable dominated systems. Finally, if they are designed to align with ecological advantages, prioritizing renewable power policies for fossil-based hydrogen and citing facilities in already degraded or industrialized area, clean hydrogen infrastructure can avoid land conflict, water depletion, and habitat destruction, and be not only local but also low impact. It can then enable conservation of landscapes and ecosystems alongside driving the energy transition. For that, hydrogen projects should respect land rights, cultural values, and local ecological knowledge. The UN Climate Change Organization is working closely with the United Nations SDSN Global Climate Hub to provide science-based and state-codified recommendations for combating the climate crisis and supporting the ecosystem restoration. The United Nations SDSN Global Climate Hub uses extensive data knowledge technology provided by experts in various fields to implement country-specific climate actions to be adopted and leaded by society. This approach is crucial for the development of appropriate climate action strategies able to withstand and cope with climate-related stresses in healthy ecosystems. The typical application example of this work is the provision of statistically downscale climate change projection at regional scale for air emission dynamics, which is used as inputs or future scenario examining the response and behavior of the natural and socio-economic systems. As the project executive of the UN Climate Change Global Innovation Hub, I want to congratulate our colleagues for organizing such an important conference, and Professor Koguris for her inspiring and transformational leadership, and thank them for our collaborative contribution in driving the research-based sustainability transition across the world. Thank you for your attention.
Leonie. It's always a pleasure to work with you and be part of your force of nature, not during COPs, but also throughout the year in bringing transformational projects on the ground, mainly driven by innovation, but not only technological innovation, governance and social innovations into a co-design mode with all stakeholders, including, of course, science and technology developers. The fourth collaborator, co-organizer of this event is, of course, the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network, the biggest network in the world on sustainability, with a mission to facilitate the implementation of UN Agenda 2030 and the Climate Paris Agreement, led by Professor Jess Sachs at Columbia University. The Athens University of Economics and Business, together with Athena Research Center and the Academy of Athens, are hosting the UN SDSN Global Climate Hub, but also our university and Athena Research Center are also the hosting institutions of SDSN Greece. So the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network has a hub in almost every country of the world. It includes 2,000 institutional members, research institutions and universities. We lead the Greek hub. We also call it the European hub, with 900 universities and research institutions across Europe. And as I said before, we also lead the Global Climate Hub, which is about climate neutrality transitions in all the countries of the world. I have the pleasure to give the floor next to Maria Lopez Bush, a dear friend, a close collaborator, a powerful woman who is the vice president of this huge network with thousands of members that has achieved to attract attention to the fact that the SDGs, the 17 SDGs, and the 169 targets within them are not just a conceptual framework about an idea. They are an integrated, holistic framework that can be scientifically implemented and enable the transformation to sustainability that will allow us to survive in this planet. Maria, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, dear friend and great leader within SDSN, Philippe. I'm joining you all from Spain today, and I have to say that I cannot avoid starting from the fact that I was made very aware yesterday of the vulnerability of our energy systems. So I cannot stress enough the importance of today's conference. We need to make these transformations, and they need to be accelerated because we depend on energy systems that will not be prepared to the kind of shocks that we're already seeing. So I'm very grateful for the organization of this conference. I look forward to hearing about the results of this conference, and that SDSN will be following it closely. Let me speak very briefly, complement perhaps a bit what Professor Kunduri just explained. explain. The SDSN was created in 2012, even before the SDGs were agreed upon. And the reason why the Secretary General of the UN, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, asked Professor Jeffrey Sachs to set up this network of universities was that he thought sustainable development is the biggest challenge that we face. It's the biggest challenge that humanity will face in the coming few decades. And not just a sustainable development understood as environmental sustainability, but really sustainable development that incorporates a way of creating prosperity that is equitable, that is just, and that also thinks about the strong institutions that we need to create peace and societies where, that good well-being at the center. Now, for this to happen, Mr. Ban Ki-moon thought we need the biggest minds and the most diverse set of knowledge at the table. We need them to contribute to the process of defining what the goals should be, defining and thinking about what the indicators to measure progress towards these goals should be, and thinking about the long-term pathways. Is it possible to really achieve these goals? And so, what would it entail? And obviously, it's very different for a country like Japan, to a country like, say, for example, Niger, or a country like Brazil, or a country like mine, Spain. So, what are the nuances of these factors? And scientists need to help us throughout this process with the diagnostics of the situation, with developing this modeling infrastructure, and also with developing concrete solutions. Now, since SDSN was up, as Professor Kunduri explained, we've grown to over 2,000 member institutions, mostly universities, and 58 networks across the world. Our networks, like the Greek SDSN, like SDSN Europe, work with governments and the private sector on these topics, on sustainable development, on thinking very pragmatically, but also scientifically rigorous. How do we achieve sustainable development in this country, in this region? Professor Kunduri within the Networks program is one of our phenomenal leaders because she wears multiple hats. And one of the hats that she wears is that of the climate hat. Now the climate hat was set up very recently, as in the last 3 years, but it has already accomplished so much, developing pathways that very rigorously explain that this is possible, that we can achieve a sustainable future, bringing together people from different sectors, from different countries, to discuss, once again, the nuances. Because it's not just about thinking whether or not we can achieve these goals, but to make the implementation possible. And this is where some countries, in fact, I think it's fair to say we're all lagging behind. We need to accelerate the implementation, and a crucial factor for this is to bring people together to reach agreements on how we're going to do this, what role each of us is going to play. And this is why Phoebe's work is so crucial for us. And I want to thank her for her leadership, and I want to congratulate her for all that she has achieved and for the convening of this extremely important conference. I don't want to take much more of your time, just to thank you all for coming together today. Once again, coming from Spain, the topic of today's conference seems even more important after the day we went through yesterday. We need to overhaul our energy systems with a very, very short time frame. This has never been done before. So the brightest minds, like all of you, getting together and thinking very rigorously and very meticulously how this needs to be done is absolutely essential. Thank you very much, and I wish you a very productive and a very successful meeting. Phoebe, thank you again for your leadership, and I'll
Thank you, Maria. Thank you very much. One other very important initiative of UNSDSN is the SETE, we call them. It's the Council of Engineers, under, again, the auspices of the UN General Secretary, the current UN General Secretary. This is a council of engineers, the best engineering minds across the world that are gathering every month to bring to the countries of the UN solutions for the energy transition, the Council of Engineers for the Energy Transition. And I want to tell you that this month we are preparing, I am there as an observer because I'm not an engineer, we are preparing the guidelines for the hydrogen transition that will be used by the UN General Secretary at the COP in Brazil and UN General Assembly. So this is again another very powerful but also very practical initiative that SDSN, Professor Jeff Sachs, Maria Cortez Bush, Elena Crete have put together, and of course it facilitates, it helps a lot our work with the Global Climate Hub. Now you will allow me to showcase a bit this work of the Global Climate Hub. So this is my clicker, and I will be talking, can I have my slides please? I will give you a general introduction to how we see integrated climate modeling and how we build these pathways to climate neutrality and climate resilience. I want to say that what is crucial behind this effort is our ability to attract research funding, significant research funding that can finance the work of very powerful researchers across different institutions that I am affiliated with, and we can actually produce recommendations that are science-based, but at the same time directly implementable. So the driving force behind all this is IFORIA, the Alliance of Excellence for Research and Innovation, or IFORIA. IFORIA means sustainability, is a Greek word, and basically brings together research and innovation centers, universities that I am affiliated with, and we have projects. So it's 2 laboratories, research laboratories, and this university, the Athens University of Economics and Business, there is this laboratory on socioeconomic and environmental sustainability, the laboratory on stochastic modeling and applications, that is very crucial for our work, the Sustainable Development Unit at Athena Research Center, and the Energy and Climate and Economics Division of the Department of Technology, Management and Economics at the Technical University of Denmark, who is also one of the main co-organizers of this event, and one of the places that part of my professorship sits in. Together with the research that is bringing more than 100 projects over the last 25 years that allowed us to have a big team of more than 200 researchers. We also have a very vivid activity on innovation. Our work with UNFCCC Innovation Hub that Masaba is leading, our work with the EIT, the European Institute of Innovation and Technology. We are the country leaders of that. And at the same time 3 accelerators that at the moment are incubating 350 startups, focusing on climate adaptation, on green shipping and ports, and sustainable marine development in the Black Sea. And together with research and innovation, we also have the policy networks. Mainly our global work with UNSDSN, but also other networks that bring together this needed osmosis between science and policy. How do you really translate scientific results into meaningful policies that can be implemented? And finally, all the research associations and academies that I lead or co-lead that bring together the world's brilliant minds, and we try to focus a lot of effort on the sustainability transition. It is important to note here that I am the president of the World Association of Environmental Resource Economies, which includes the European Association, the US, the Latin American, the African, the Australian, and the Asian. And this is a critical mass of hundreds of thousands of environmental and natural resource economies that can be very instrumental in shaping meaningful policies that can support the welfare of people in this generation, but also intergenerationally. So our thematic areas are climate neutrality and resilience, water, food, energy nexus, and biodiversity and land use. Oceans, sustainable oceans, and seas, socioeconomic, financial, behavioral economics, innovation acceleration, and education, upskilling, and reskilling. Our approach is the following. We start from the policy framework, and this is what you have on the slide, which I'm not going to go through, is a summary, bird's eye view of the European policy framework for the sustainability transition. Starting from 2015, the SDGs UN Agenda 2030 and the climate agreement in Paris a few months later, and then the translation of all of that into the concept of the European Green Deal, supported by 1 trillion just before COVID, and having 4 main axes: climate neutrality by 2050, protection of biodiversity and reduction of pollution, clean tech leadership of European companies, and leaving no one behind, social inclusion and cohesion. And then there are all these policies that are translating these priorities into implementable pathways. So we have policies about, we have the climate law, we have Fit for 55, we have the European Sustainability Directive, we have the EU Repower after the war in Ukraine, we have the natural restoration law, and lately the Draghi report and the omnibus for the sustainability directive. And all this adds up to 150 new laws and regulations that have been transposed into national law. And our work is to help governments implement the combination of all these policies by designing the pathways that will get the different systems in a country to co-work and achieve these policies by 2050s. In order to design pathways, you need to know where you are. So the first thing we do, and this is the work that is led by SDSN, is to measure where each country stands with regards to the implementation of the SDGs. We have a global report, and this global report showcases for each SDG and for each 169 targets within the SDGs, what is the level of performance in each and every country. And here are the environmental SDGs. You should know that there are only 5 environmental SDGs. The UN Agenda 2030 is not about the environment. It's about how the economy and the society uses the environment in order to have sustainability. And you can see that all of our systems, the first one is the food system, the second one is the climate system, the third one is the land use system, the fourth one is the marine system, the fifth one is the water system. All of our systems are far behind in implementing the SDGs because red means you have stagnation with regards to implementation, orange, major challenges, yellow, significant challenges, and green means the SDG has been achieved. And we have a European report that I call it, and we have country-level reports that are very, very detailed and have a significant backbone of data, geospatial data, time series data, socioeconomic data, and so on. And we transpose these reports also to areas within countries. So we can have a very detailed understanding of where we are. And we also have a very detailed policy framework. So we have this gap. And our job is to close this gap. Design the optimal mixture of technologies, policies, fiscal and financial instruments and governance that will allow us to close this gap. So, our first priority, climate neutrality and resilience. Anywhere you see gray, we don't have a project. All other areas with colors, we have a project across the world. And I'm not going to allow the sliders to go, but these are the different projects acquiring competitive funding from the European Commission, from international multilateral organizations, from governments, from banks, multilateral banks, that allow us to do our work seriously. The second priority is water, food, energy, biodiversity, and land use nexus. Again, we work across the globe, and again, we have many, many different projects. At this point, I want to tell you that we are particularly proud about our work with the European Research Council, our 10 million project with the European Research Council. And I just arrived from Brussels, where we launched an initiative that is called Ambassadors for the European Research Council. This is the most prestigious research grants in Europe. And now this initiative that we launched yesterday is about communicating the results and the impact of this funding across Europe and beyond. It's enough to say that within ERC grant deals, there are more than 18 Nobel Prize winners and I think 6 field medalists. Sustainable pathways for seas and oceans. We work in almost all seas. Sustainable socio-economic, financial pathways and behavioral economic, creating incentives within the economy in order to finance the transition, but also creating the fiscal space to support those that are affected in a negative way, that they cannot afford to buy for the transition. And innovation acceleration, we have talked about this, many different projects and accelerators and incubators here. And finally, we care about education and skills. And at the COP at UEA, we've presented our report that showcased that 85% of the skills and occupations that are needed in order to implement the laws of the European Green Deal, these are laws that have been transposed into national laws. We have to implement them. 85% of all the skills needed and occupations is missing from the labor market. So we need to invest in serious effort in upskilling and reskilling and reshaping our curricula and our education projects and institutions in order to create the labor force that can actually implement the European Green Deal. And we even have an AI skills tool that identifies what skills are needed for the implementation of the different laws and regulations and the mixtures of them. And we work with SDG Academy, at the moment the biggest mass open course platform with more than 2 million subscribers and hundreds of educational courses, professional courses made available completely free, open access to anybody who is interested. The Global Climate Hub, I'm going to go faster. What is the innovation here? The innovation is that this is the first time in the world that we bring all the components that are needed in order to design implementable transformational pathways. We have 3 layers of analysis. The first layer is mathematical modeling, climate modeling, mainly supported by the Academy of Athens, the Institute for Atmospheric Physics and Climate, which is represented in this conference, downscaling climate scenarios, and then building the energy system transformations, the transport system transformations, the land use transformations, the marine use transformations, health system transformations, and embedding the integration of these transformations, which are, you should imagine, mathematical models with regards to this, embedding them in computable general equilibrium analysis of socioeconomic systems in order to identify the effects in the different sectors of the economy of each country, but at the same time identify where you're going to find the resources to finance the transformations and how you're going to support the vulnerable. The second layer that functions simultaneously and interactively with the mathematical modeling is the transdisciplinary co-design modeling. So we use SDSM extensive network with a hub in each country of the world, which includes scientists, technology developers, politicians, policymakers, businesses, financiers, the civil society, and we co-design the transformation. Science gives you a solution, but this solution needs to be informed by the structure and participatory approaches with the stakeholders to make sure that you embed local knowledge, local wisdom, preferences, visions, and so on. And at the same time, in order to really engage the stakeholders in the co-design and make them owners of the transition pathways, you need to educate them. Because if they don't understand, they won't be engaged. And the final layer is the digital platforms and applications. And this digital platforms and application basically gathers all the data, all the models, all the results and visualizations of the results, and the decision support systems, digital tools that allow the stakeholders to use this open platform of transition pathways. And Professor Ioannidis, the previous president of Athena Research Center, will say a bit more about this platform. Not just the previous president of Athena Research Center, but also the president of the Global Association of Computing Machinery, and a professor of informatics. Very quickly, the structure of the the modeling. We start for food and land use modeling. We integrate natural resource modeling, water and land in that. Then we integrate energy and emission systems, then maritime systems, and then we embed them in socio-economic systems. And what we do is a simulation between different scenarios. Here we have a showcase of the business as usual and the national commitment scenarios. The national commitment scenario transposes into the 4 main policy pillars in the country: the climate and energy plan, which is developed by the Ministry of Energy and part of the committee of the ministry that develops this plan. Then the GAP, the Common Agricultural Policy, as transposed into the Greek agricultural sector. Then the regulations of IMO and EU ETS about maritime, which are very important for Greece because Greece is a leading country with regards to shipping, has the biggest commercial fleet in the world. And the other pillar policy is, of course, the water management policy, which is the Water Framework Directive, transposing to management plans in the different river basins. For the food systems, we use the FABLE calculator. This is a simulation accounting tool, and it derives efficient pathways for land use, agriculture, food systems, forestry, bioenergy, in order to allow meeting the country's climate targets, biodiversity targets, and at the same time achieving food security. This is a global network, a global project led by IASA and also by the SDSN, the UN SDSN. We have hubs in different countries across the world, and we integrate the result internationally. And at the end of the day, when we use it, we have the transition pathways for the production in agriculture, for the cost, for the land use, and at the same time for greenhouse gas emissions. And we can showcase what is the efficient thing to do in order to get agriculture to becoming climate neutral or whatever of climate, of decarbonization and reduction in methane we can achieve, and at the same time support food security in the country. So first we have the pathway for the food system, and of course always we work in stakeholder informed structures. Then we have the energy system. For this we use LEAP, but we also upgrade LEAP because we don't only use the supply structure of LEAP, which indicates the energy requirements for each and every sector of the economy. We also, residential sector, industrial sector, agricultural sector, transport sector, services, we also have the energy supply, primary resources, secondary resources, transformation processes, and greenhouse gas emissions. And we showcase what is the optimal mixture of technologies for transposing the country into a climate neutral country, and at the same time we showcase emissions. And we integrate in this energy system the land use system. I'm finishing in 2 minutes. With BTU, we've done with another model the whole energy system transformation for the whole of Europe and the Balkans and the UK. And these are the results, the optimal mixture of energy sources and the energy corridors. And Professor Gellers will talk about this later on. This we showed at the conference in Dubai, and we've done the same for hydrogen. Dr. Yannis Koundouris will talk about this. And within the land use and the energy system, we integrate the biofuel system, which is basically very important for Greece because it shows potential for using biofuels for maritime, whereas at the moment we import biofuel, and then we calculate the land requirements of the energy system and the biofuels, because a renewable will increase. What are the land requirements and what that would mean for the food systems? So it's all integrated into mathematical models. And then we have resilience. So you all know that climate produces mega fires. After the mega fire, probably you have floods. So we simulate the impact of the fires. We do the hydraulic modeling in terms of the possible impact of floods after a forest fire, and then we create, design flood protection and soil erosion interventions. And we showcase how much it can be saved in terms of cost and loss in human life if you actually intervene in this way. And then, of course, we have the water requirements. Water is crucial for energy, for agriculture, and then we have the maritime system, which integrates information from the energy system. And at the end of the day, we have our optimal feed growth, investment options, fuel transition, emissions and ETS impact, and identifying challenges for the marine sector. To cut a long story short, we showcase how the different systems can integrate into a transition that is implementable, doable, efficient, and achieves climate, biodiversity, and food security targets. And not only that, but we also have a rotation of the different policies in terms of priority in order to make the system as efficient as possible. And finally, we integrate everything into socio-economic system, and importantly, integrated the value of nature and all other externalities in this system to act with explicit fiscal and financial policies that can support the transition. And then we are also working mainly through Pope Francis' leadership, the late Pope Francis' leadership at the Pontifical Academy of Science for the forthcoming UN Conference on Financing Development, how we are going to restructure UN financial institutions in order to be able to finance the transition, not just in the global north, but also in the global south. And it's, of course, about tackling the high cost of debt, giving long-run loans with almost zero interest rate, because the potential of growth when you invest in a developing country, if you are supporting it institutionally and governance-wise, is much bigger than any growth you can achieve in an already developed countries. And finally, we also showcase the footprint of ESG laws and regulations in the global financial markets, which is very, very positive, having looked at 97% of global market capitalization. So the message is, I shouldn't talk so much, and also that integration, holisticness, mathematical accuracy, and participation of stakeholders are needed ingredients for designing something that it can be implemented. Thank you very much. By Professor Yannis Ioannidis, who is leading our work on the digital platform and applications of the Global Climate Hub. He's now in Japan, but he has sent a video to present the work that is supporting all the digital functions of the Global Climate Hub. person who leads the master course of the university on the economics and laws of energy transition, energy markets, to come and give us 2 minutes of description, 2 or 5 minutes of the description of the course, because we already mentioned our focus on
this video, but my mind is there with you in all this interesting discussion that we're having here. What I will talk about is the digital aspect of the Global Climate Hub, and in particular the collaborative platform that we're building in order to facilitate all the scientists from all the disciplines that are involved in CCH in order to model climate, model other elements that are affected by climate change, and therefore come up with conclusions that will be helpful in moving forward. The classical platform, the Global Climate Hub of the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, has 4 main elements. It's a modern platform that is based on the cloud, so that everyone can access it from everywhere. And the main goal is to connect data and modeling. And when we say modeling, we mean specialized top-down modeling that scientists from the various disciplines can come up with, or artificial intelligence machine learning model, in order to be able to capture things both top-down and bottom-up. Both data and models will be saved, will be stored in a common repository, so that again access is uniform, powerful connections can be made, and so the analysis of data can be done not just for a model that was created for a particular data set, but to use for multiple purposes something that has been generated. And of course, the main important element is that all this can be given as services, as value-added services to the users with interactive dashboards of various forms, for various purposes, so that people can visualize the climate data, the socioeconomic data, obtain insights from them, and then proceed with decision making. All of this, in order, the reason why we bring the platform is in order to collaborate. What the Global Climate Hub aims at is interdisciplinary work, interdisciplinary research. The demands of handling the problems, the issues that we have with the climate at various levels are heavily interdisciplinary, so we want to bring everyone together in order to do this. This is a very high-level architecture. I will not bother with too many details, but just want to give you a very quick tour so you can understand the complexity of what we're trying to build. Certainly we have common storage with various modern technologies so that all the data sets and models can be stored there. The resources can be things that are available widely in an open way, both specialized resources from repositories from the scientists involved in the Global Climate Hub, but also generic things like Zenodor data that we can collect from the World Bank and other resources. And all this can be ingested with a pipeline of data manipulation, data wrangling that is being used widely in an open way in many infrastructures, including open air, that will bring us the data ready to be analyzed and manipulated. And with standard advanced technologies of creating AI and machine learning models, we will be able to take all this data, analyze it, and come up with value-added output. In addition to general AI machine learning, as I said, definitely specific models, top-down models, specialized models that scientists are creating so that we can bring together both the AI models and the specialized models to fuse the data, to integrate the data, and bring up the advanced knowledge that we may be able to identify. All of this is supported by, again, standard stack of connecting the various models into pipelines or workflows that will give advanced services beyond what every particular model can create. And always the user is in our minds. The key thing is that we'll have a whole bunch of dashboards that will serve different purposes, from decision support, simulation, visualization, or even the development of particular models facilitated by notebooks. So with expertise that exists from many other areas, we'll bring together, we'll have a first-class platform that can support all the digital needs of the global climate hub. These are just 3 examples of dashboards that we can think of. Again, the platform is under development, but you can imagine interactive dashboards where people visualize economic data, climate data, and other kinds of data as they are ingested, as they are changed, of course, by searching, filtering, and so on and so forth. In the middle, we can have overall solutions, tailored solutions that are particularly needed or demanded in the context of the global climate hub, custom prediction software, and other things that, like Fable and Leap, that I mentioned in the previous slide, and also interactive models to develop new things, continuously expanding, continuously adding, and scaling based on the needs that are being created. Just a case study that is under development. For example, one can choose a country, in this particular case Greece, and choose particular data sets that are maybe needed that the Sustainable Development Solutions Network is providing, or from other sources, and then passing them through models like Fable for agricultural productivity or Leap for energy demands. Then we can have what if scenarios. What if we do a particular case in business as usual, or the way the Sustainable Development Solutions Network is recommending, or other things that we may see in the country, and then automatically we can visualize what the impact will be of one or the other decision, so that then people, the scientists, can have an understanding of what the trends are going. Very quickly, the platform is in this timeline. We are in the second quarter of 2025. By the end of it, we'll have the first version of the data repository and very simulated scenarios that then we can offer to the users, so stay tuned for that. And in the next 3 quarters, by the end of the first quarter of 2026, we'll have the first version of the complete functionality of the Global Climate Hub platform for the use. So this is, in very quick terms, what we're after. The key thing is collaboration, interdisciplinary collaboration of scientists that have different backgrounds and different models that come together. We designed the platform with scale in mind, because the data will be extremely, in a very accelerated way, increasing in size. The models will be growing. The challenges and the impact of, as the conditions are changing, will be done, will be putting challenges, and we need to be ready for this. And of course, to make all this in a simple way, so that both the ingestion of data, the modeling, and eventually the visualization can be in a way that will be that will remove all the burden of management from the scientists, and then we'll be able to focus on their actual target. Thank you very much.
The stage, the former Minister of Climate Change and Environment of UEA. It's a great honor, a pleasure to have such a powerful professor, but also politician, to talk to us. And I will not spend any time. Probably you had enough of my voice. Please, Dr. Abullah Al-Muamin, the person who made one of the most successful hoax to our minds Our ecosystem has followed almost all COPs that ever happened. This one was a leadership example. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Very pleased to be here this morning. And I was taken by the idea of having a seminar of this sort in a university. This actually means that we are bringing back the theme back to its place. Because I remember the time when we looked into the impact of climate change being handled far away from institutions, research institutions and universities. And it was taken by us politicians. Today I thought maybe I would actually take the tie of a politician and address you as a professor in sustainability. I remember the time when we decided to host COP28, the 28th version of the Conference of Parties. We thought we are in United Arab Emirates. We're a country that produces oil and gas. Our leadership thought differently. They thought that we should step in to lead the way, the regional leadership in actually coming up with renewables and looking into fighting the impact of climate change. So we did. It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy to compete many countries to host COP28, and it's the first time that it actually marched into a country that actually produces oil. And also thinking on what is it that we should include into the agenda to make it successful. So we thought of looking into youth as part of that particular event. We increased the number of youth. The first time youth were fighting last month, you remember, trying to get in and say their words. In United Arab Emirates, in COP28, we did not give them the chance to fight. We actually opened the doors for them and say, the future is yours, and we are trying to help. So that is where I come from. Today we speak about hydrogen, and I don't know. I'm very pleased to see it here in an institution, really. And I would just like to ask myself, a few years ago, when I thought in actually producing my first book, it is actually Climate Change, a Delicate Balance. I thought, what are the reasons by which we actually producing that much of emissions globally? And can we look into other options apart from renewables? Because I thought, as an educator, that also minerals that we use in renewables, just like fossil fuel, they will vanish in one day. Some statistics, a consultant actually is producing data that most of the minerals that we use today for renewables are not going to be with us in 80 years' time? What other options that we can do? Then we thought of hydrogen. Before I forget, 6 months ago, I was actually addressing NATO and Rome about the impact of war in climate change. Can you guess how much are we producing? How much war is it producing? The recorded one, at least. There are some that are classified that we don't know. The recorded one is 10 times emissions as much as we produce in United Arab Emirates. 10 times, it is 6%. We produce just below 0.6%. Now, today, we speak of hydrogen, and I believe that hydrogen is probably the way forward. But I've always asked myself, do we really mean by hydrogen as a replacement to the existing fossil fuel? Or we're looking into a carrier that actually helps us in the impact on climate change? I'm afraid we are doing neither. During the last 2 decades, the world spent $500 billion. Not in hydrogen, in only pipelines. Because when we thought of producing hydrogen a long time ago, we thought that the existing pipeline that we carry natural gas would be helpful. Unfortunately, they were not. Because you all know that hydrogen is very light and cannot be pressurized into the existing pipelines. So it's not the gas that would behave like natural gas. It is different. We also know that gas, or the hydrogen, is not abundant on our atmosphere. So we have to manufacture it. And 99% of the manufacturing, regardless of the rainbow colors that we call green, blue, turquoise, and all these colors, they were there, gray and black, they were there. But we see one particular color, that is the green. Anybody knows what is the percentage of green hydrogen that we produce after spending $500 billion in pipeline? Thank you very much. It is 1%. The 99% is actually, part of it is blue, but 97 is gray. Do we know how much that costs our climate? Anybody knows how much and what is the impact of producing hydrogen? We produced, I brought some figures with me this morning. Producing a ton of hydrogen requires burning more than double the energy as an efficiency. We actually dump to the atmosphere. We produce 97 million tons of hydrogen, and we dump 900 million tons of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. That was the latest 2023 data. Not only that, I was actually tracing the nitrous oxide. We used to have that gas that probably we fought for a long time when our when our ozone was impacted, in Montreal Agreement, we fought for a long time to get rid of that specific gas that actually harms our atmosphere. Today, we are actually producing it. It's another gas, but it is actually hampering our ozone. That is the nitrogen oxide. That is why I'm very pleased to see the hydrogen issue coming back and being hosted by universities and institutions. And I'm very pleased to see some data that has been shown a little while ago. Very pleased to know that we are aware that the artificial intelligence also is also not helping us a lot, but also dumping some disasters to our climate. We really need to think probably differently than what we think, what we produce today in terms of drawing the future. We all look into a better future, but many of us look into the future without knowing the criteria that we need to know. What is it that we really need to do? We were told a long time ago, it's good to pool. Students, if you want to go to university, go into together, pool riding. That will save some. But we've been doing a lot. Today, only plastic is enough, cement is enough. These industries need to be decarbonized before we look into how do we improve the status of our atmosphere. How do we come up with a new gas that does not exist and it actually plan the future? I am quite sure that hydrogen, at one point of time, would actually draw the line in decarbonizing the industries. But which industries? Today, to produce green hydrogen, we really need to produce a carrier of hydrogen. We really need to go to renewables. Now we have the biggest locations that are actually competing for producing hydrogen. I know that in Mauritania, in Oman, the Oman in Mauritania and the Omanis, the Australians, all of them are actually looking into hydrogen very carefully, and they're producing hydrogen. But everybody is producing it to export it to a different country. Maybe liquefy it and then export it to a different countries. Do we know the supply and demand? How much do we need for the future of hydrogen? We really need to look into that, because it's very important to know what is it that we need in the future. I remember the time, some 4 years ago, I believe, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I wrote an article for an English British magazine, a newspaper. And in that article, I said, fossil fuel will be with us till the last drop of it. And then the chief editor liked that. He liked it a lot because this is logical. We have that fossil fuel that will finish in 50 years and we will use it. They liked the article, and then they Googled who is the man who wrote it. They discovered that this man who wrote it is a politician of some petroleum country. Then they wrote to my assistant, they said, very sorry, we cannot publish this. She asked them, we had the confirmation that this article is good to go. They said, now we realize that the writer is a politician, and this would look like being a paid article. I sympathize with them, that is true. However, 5 years later, we realized that we still have gas and oil as the main source of our lives. And it will stay forever. So the way forward, as I can see it, is not to look into future disasters like nitrous oxide and others, because we look into some other issues. We really need to look into what is it that we need from our fuel. And the existing fuel that we have, how long would it last? And look into technologies, maybe use some quantum computing, nanotechnology, artificial intelligence together to really decarbonize some of the existing So oil and gas are there, and they are fueling all your engine, all your engine here. Let's look into how can we together. You have a university here, research institutions in there, and very advanced. Maybe we can make sense if we put our efforts together and produce something that makes sense to the world and to the industries. We make sense to our children. As we speak today, the temperature of our atmosphere is actually forecasted to be above the indicated 1.5 or 2 that has been thought of in Paris Agreement. We actually looking into a 2.6 degrees Celsius increase, and that is disastrous. Some say it is 2.8. The last thought, the forecast was 2. And maybe you are well aware of the fact, in a 2 point or above, what will happen to the 5 systems that you have spoken about. Biodiversity, what is going to be happening? Our water, our lives. What is going to happen? That is where universities should actually come and step themselves in and produce the future map that could actually make sense to the future youth, that could actually make sense to the governments. Today, we have an agreement that is, I think it's no longer valid, the Paris Agreement today, because one of the main countries that actually fought for this Paris Agreement to be there and scrap the old agreements is not there anymore. The United States of America is not part of it. So I believe that we together, the world together, universities together, should actually be working in a more sensible way to produce a map for the future with the existing fuel that could actually produce a better life for the future. Maybe we can decarbonize anything that could be possible. Maybe we can reduce our energy minister a year ago, 6 months ago, provided data on an energy mix that could actually be helpful to the whole world. Now we should ask him, what is it that you are thinking in mind? He did not bring it from the air. He must have some data. In my country, we don't talk with no data. I remember the time when our president, 5-6 years ago, he says in 50 years' time, we would actually be excited when the last barrel of oil is shipped from our country. And then that could actually be misleading message. And then when we thought, why did he say that? He said it and he meant it. Because in 50 years' time, oil is not going to be there. Not only in United Arab Emirates. It's not going to be there. It's either it will be vanishing, reducing, or technology will surpass it. When we gave up coal, it was not that it was not there. Coal would stay with us for the next 100+ years, but the technology left it behind, and they used fossil, they used gas, they used oil. So coal was standby, still there. So it's very important to realize that the future is not waiting for us to come up with new gases that could actually make our life even more miserable. I thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. I should thank our ambassador who took the time and schedule to be here, to listen to us. And I thank you very much, Doctor. Thank you so much. Thank you very much, professors, for being here. Your address is really marvelous. And when we think that artificial intelligence should actually be looked at carefully because its impact is massive, not only on the air, but it's also on the water. So we really need to be very careful in the terminology when we speak. I thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to say this. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Minister. This is exactly to the point. This was an excellent speech because this is the mission of the Global Climate Hub, that we are bringing together global expertise to identify the optimal mixture of fuels, of technologies, of policies and fiscal and financial instruments that will get us where we need to be. Exactly that. To identify and recommend the optimal mixture that also has a business case. And for that, of course, we always need people that can work on all of this modeling and technology development. And this is why the leadership of Professor Karidis, who is leading the master course on economics and law of energy markets, is crucial for our university and before. Professor Karidis, can you briefly introduce the course? And then I think we take a short break, and then we have the experts. After the short break, we have the experts' speeches on the decarbonization pathways of the energy system, including hydrogen, that we have designed with RDTU.
Your Excellency, Mr. Minister, dear participants, first of all, I would like to welcome you and to thank the organizers of this conference, especially my colleague, dealing with a significant aspect of the EU energy transition. As European law professor and director of the master's program in law and economics in energy markets, I have the opportunity to present very briefly and very fastly the EU legal framework for the development of renewable hydrogen and to link it to the text of the Treaty of the Functioning of European Union. According to the treaty, the energy transition is a central pillar of the EU environmental and energy policy. It is linked with the main goals of these policies mentioned in the Articles 191 and 194 of the treaty, such as the promotion of energy efficiency, the energy saving, the development of new and renewable forms of clean energy, and the security of supply, of energy supply. Energy transition can provide benefits, not only for the climate, but also for the economy and the society. It supports the objective of climate neutrality established by the European Green Deal. However, the important thing is that the EU energy transition should be sustainable and inclusive and must not leave anyone behind. It has to be a just transition, in other words. Besides, the access to affordable, reliable and sustainable energy is included in the United Nations Sustainability Goals. Developing renewable energies consists the very core of the EU's energy transition. Renewable hydrogen stands as a key component in the EU's strategy in the energy transition, net zero and sustainable development. It is one of the current priorities of the European Union. The European Hydrogen Policy Framework includes binding targets for the uptake of renewable hydrogen in industry and transport by 2030. Recent guidance supports member states and investors in implementing these targets. The policy framework also includes the hydrogen and decarbonized gas market package to support the creation of optimum infrastructure for hydrogen as well as a competitive and efficient hydrogen market. The revised rules create a level playing field for the hydrogen market and infrastructure and remove barriers that hamper their development. Finally, two delegated acts adopted in February 2023 also complement the policy framework. The adoption of these acts entails legal certainty for both producers and consumers of renewable hydrogen and is a pivotal step to attract the necessary investments to decarbonize the energy system. Investment support has also been provided through the important projects of common European interest. In addition, various member states are developing competitive schemes to enable renewable hydrogen projects to be developed at least cost. In this context, Greece aims by 2030 to position itself as a regional hub for importing green hydrogen from North Africa and the Middle East and exporting it to the European countries. Greece's ambitious energy plans include also the development of green hydrogen to cover the needs of the transportation, shipping and aviation industries. The EU's legal framework for renewable hydrogen addresses environmental impact and safety standards associated with hydrogen production and use. It emphasizes also the integration of hydrogen with other sectors, such as transport, industry, and heating. Furthermore, it aims to foster a competitive hydrogen market and to create favorable conditions for market entry. Overall, this framework represents a significant step toward a sustainable hydrogen economy. However, continued collaboration innovation, and regulatory refinement will be essential to overcome challenges and fully realize the potential of renewable hydrogen in the energy transition. Both the private sector and governments can play their part in facilitating the hydrogen economy. The conclusion is that hydrogen has its limitations, but it can play a vital role in the transition to cleaner and sustainable energy. Dear participants, as already mentioned, the energy transition is a central aim of the Union's energy policy. It serves the competitive function of the energy markets and the security of energy supply in the Union, and it promotes the development of new and renewable forms of energy. The relevant Union policies address both the environmental protection and the integration of the energy markets. The coherent implementation of these policies strongly requires a complicated balancing of prima facie opposite interests like competition and sustainability. This balancing should be carried out according to the principle of proportionality. Furthermore, the interdisciplinary approach consists a sine qua non condition for the comprehension and the appropriate regulation of the EU energy markets in order to ensure competition, to promote fair and affordable prices for Union citizens and undertakings, and to manage climate change. I believe that our master program in law and economics in energy markets serve this purpose. Thank you for your attention.
Let's take a 20-minute break. There is coffee and some sweets outside. And let's come back for the experts' talk.
Okay, so good morning everyone, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. In the interest of time, we'll proceed with our program this morning. My name is Dr. Binaka Chete. I'm a senior researcher with the AUEB Group. I do all the work on stakeholder approaches, systems innovation, and the participatory work that we do. I also lead the 8th unit of the Global Climate Hub on transitions and participatory approaches. So we have a treat now in store for you for this next session, a panel of expert speeches from a distinguished group of researchers that we have with us today. So first I'd like to invite to the stage Dr. Stavros Solomos from the Academy of Athens, and he's a senior researcher at the Center for Atmospheric Physics and Climatology. Next, I would like to invite Professor Marie Monster from the Department of Technology and Management and Economics at DTU. Mr. Thies Marsden, a PhD candidate, also at the Technical University of Denmark. And finally, Dr. Yanis Koutouris, no relation I'm told, from the Technical University of Denmark and New Power Partners. And so to kick us off, I would like Dr. Stavros Solomos, who will be here representing Professor Christos Erythros, also from the Academy of Athens.
Okay, thank you very much for the invitation and for being here. Professor Christos Erythros was not able to make it today, but I will try to make this talk. So, do have So actually, this is about a recent study that we did with the Aquila Energy Company regarding the power, the renewable power availability in Europe. So we will bring this perspective in our discussion. Okay, this is actually the part where Professor Delphos talks about our connection with the roots and how Aristotle was the first, wrote the first book on meteorology, which you can also find in a comprehensive study made by Professor Delphos in this textbook. And the important thing about this kind of book being the first book of meteorology is not that actually Aristotle described in an accurate manner the physical phenomena, but that he tried to explain what's happening. And this vision of trying to explain the physical mechanisms is what drives our studies even today, and we still need to work on data and scientific understanding. So we all know that we are already facing the man-made climate change, and like Mr. Minister gave an excellent talk earlier about how we need to rely on data when we talk about, especially as scientists, when we talk about the climate change and the climate mechanisms. And especially in the Mediterranean, we live in an area that is very vulnerable. We have experienced very severe extremes in the recent years, including cyclones, flooding, wildfires, and things like that, and heat waves, of course. All of these are very damaging for our environment and for infrastructure and for human life, of course, but also very demanding in power. The prognosis, the future of our climate, in climate study, we always update our forecasts and improve the statistics and the findings and fine-tune our model runs and everything. But the main finding remains the same. We're going towards a warmer planet. And what this means for each separate area of our planet takes a lot of consideration and analysis in order to understand the effects in local and regional scale. But the main point does not change. Regarding the heat waves, in Greece we faced the first major heat wave in 1987 with many deaths, and it was something that we had not experienced earlier. And what happened in Greece several decades later happened in Eastern and Western Europe with the huge event of 2003, again with many casualties and losses in agriculture, and of course the loss of huge amounts of ice from the mountains. And we know this brings a positive feedback loop in accelerating the climate impacts when talking about the change in land use and especially the change in the ice cover. And when we look towards the future and the forecast of European temperatures for the 60s and 2000s, 60s and 80s, it looks like the 2003 heat wave might be something like normality compared to what we might expect to face in the decades to come. So, this is the study that we were invited to contribute as the Academy of Athens, together with other scientists across Europe. And you see here that it is about the European power sovereignty, which is quite strong word. I mean, it's not sustainability or autonomy. And how this can be achieved through the renewable potential in Europe. So this, in this review study, we focused, for example, in the Mediterranean, which can provide huge amounts of solar energy potential, that is at some points comparable also to, let's say, the North African or the Arabian Peninsula potential. And this can be one of the parameters that needs to be taken into consideration. The second one is, of course, the wind energy potential, both onshore and offshore. Here you see only the potential in the Mediterranean, but there is also quite significant wind availability for offshore wind turbines in the North Seas that are also, due to the more shallow waters, it is easier to install the floating wind farms and the offshore wind farms there. But also in the Mediterranean, especially in the Aegean, there is quite a lot of wind potential, and in some other areas. And it's not only during the winter months that, of course, we have most of the wind, but also during summer months, because in Greece we have the Athens, which is a seasonal wind that covers the Aegean during summer. And similar wind regimes are also have seasonality, like the Mistral, for example, in France, and other flows. So this is something that has to be taken into account. But the big question, as you all know, is how to store this energy. And although the hydroelectric energy looks to have somehow reached a threshold in Europe in terms of how we can use it, it can be a very promising technology to be used for power storage. By using an upper and a lower reservoir, you can lift the amounts of water when you have sufficient power that is not distributed to the system. And this is like a natural battery that can provide stability and power when needed. And this comes also to the discussion after the event that we all faced yesterday with the Portugal and Iberian energy crash, which has not yet been fully analyzed, but it's very likely that it's also related to the stability issues that come from the use of renewable energy sources in the system. Geothermal energy is also something that must be exploited. There are many areas due to the volcanism in Europe and Mediterranean that have sufficient potential for geothermal energy, at least to support small-scale power needs and local power needs. And finally, the energy of sea waves is again a new technology that is promising and has to be included in the mix of our technologies for renewable power in Europe. There are, of course, certain limitations there because the higher waves are in the Atlantic Ocean, but the Atlantic Ocean is a very dangerous area to develop technology and energy sea wave farms there. But closed seas like the Mediterranean or the Black Sea can be used for this scope. So when coming into the annual investments that are required in the next decades for the development of renewable energy sources in Europe, it looks like the photovoltaic sector is increasing, while the onshore wind is decreasing in terms of annual investments in the following decades, and it is replaced by the potential of offshore wind farming to bring the necessary power in the system. And this is the last slide. Although in the beginning we used this sovereignty term, it looks like most of the technology that is needed to develop such renewable parks and turbines and everything in Europe has to be imported from other countries, for example in China and other countries in Asia and elsewhere. And which brings us, of course, to the question of how we must look towards a closer collaboration between countries rather than independent efforts in order to achieve some neutrality and reduce the carbon emissions and the fossil fuels in the next decades. Thank you for your attention and thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that talk, Stavros, and thank you for giving us the historic perspective as well on climate change. Not surprisingly, it's Greek, as with most things that started in Greece. But I think you made some very interesting points there about the diversification of the different renewable sources and how, again, once again, coming back to this issue of collaboration, it's key that we all work in partnership and in collaboration to make this transition happen. One aspect that you did raise is the aspect about uncertainty, so looking at the irregularity of generation. So our next speaker, Professor Marie Moser, will speak to us about uncertainties and development of PTX in Europe.
Thank you very much. I think that one of the uncertainties about Power to X is to which extent is this going to happen and how much hydrogen are we going to need. And I think, first of all, that depends how serious we are about addressing climate change, but also to which extent are we just simply going to rely on using biomass to solve the problem, or to which extent do we also take into account the fact that we have a biodiversity crisis. And then basically where we start is where we say, well, first we look at efficiency measures. Then we electrify more or less everything we can. And then we might have direct use of hydrogen, for example, in industries. And then we start looking at, for example, the transport sector, but also backup power that will be needed. I'm not sure that's why they crashed in Spain, but we're still waiting to hear the diagnostics on that. We've been working on a project financed by Danish funding, looking at Power-to-X infrastructures, and what I'm going to present today is focusing on the hydrogen infrastructures, where we've been looking together with other modelers. We've been using the Balmoral model, and we've also had ParkSat and Times people involved in the study. And the Balmoral model is basically a model that looks at the energy system. We are applying it in Europe. We are looking at a sector-coupled system where we are looking at electricity, we look at heating, we look at gas, we look at fuel demands together. Because there are some synergies in that. And so we start by supplying the demands. So these are exogenous and quite important for this discussion. And then we have the different prices, taxes, subsidies, technology costs, and weather data. So in a few minutes you'll realize it sounds like we've coordinated our presentations. We didn't, but I'll get back to that. And then what we get out is the optimal expansion of generation and transmission, dispatch information, electricity prices, plant revenues, CO2 emissions, and this is the model we're working with. One example from Dr. Kulturis and others of us in the audience was an example where we looked at the hydrogen infrastructure that might be required in a European context, and we found what is the optimal mix from a power side, and also what is the kind of the optimal expansion of the transmission grid, as well as the production of the hydrogen either via electrolysis or via blue hydrogen. And but of course, in the process, we realized there are many uncertainties in this game, and we wanted to look more into maybe providing a space of solutions rather than one or a few optimal solutions. So we continued looking into global sensitivity analysis, where we generate 1,000 different scenarios. And the global part means that we are varying several different parameters at the same time, which gives us this huge solution space. And basically what we looked at, which are quite important for the results, are the variable renewable energy potentials, which is what we just heard about. We looked at electricity and hydrogen demands, investment, operation and maintenance costs, hydrogen import prices, CO2 tax levels, and efficiencies. So many different parameters that we are varying at the same time. And we then divided the results from the different regions into 4 different regions, where we have the north, where Denmark is part of, and we have the west, which includes UK and Ireland, quite importantly, and Germany, and France. And then we have the south, where Greece, Italy, Spain, and so on is part of, and the east with the eastern countries. So, and now I'll show you some results, and they will be violin plots, and sometimes they might need a little explanation. So here we go. This represents the lowest value, this is the highest value. Here we have the most common value, so this is where we have many representations of results within that. And then we have the median value, and it's represented with a quartile range. So this is how we play the violin, and now let's get started. It doesn't look like a violin, but you get the idea. So first of all, what do we see kind of these solution spaces for each of these regions? And here we're looking at the green hydrogen capacity in 2030 and in 2050. And what immediately, if you come from Greece, comes into the eye is where's Greece, right? Where's the south? What happens is that we see a huge expansion in the west. And this is due to the good wind conditions. There's also okay sun conditions, but also, very importantly, this is where we see a lot of demand located. So it makes sense to try to kind of locate the production with the demand. But when we look into 2050, then we see the south coming in, and with the high production. And incidentally, the combined capacity 300 gigawatt, and the European goal is around 450. So we're not completely off, but we are a bit lower than the official European goals. When we look at the transmission capacity requirements, it kind of follows the same picture. First an expansion in the west, and then followed also by an expansion in the south, going towards 2050. And now more iron plugs in different colors. So what do we see here? We have the north, the south, the west, and the east. And we have, how do we actually then produce the electricity? And this is where the former speaker and I now start to agree a little bit. Because we're seeing with yellow the photovoltaics, with the light blue the onshore production, and with dark blue the offshore production. And we're starting now in 2030, and what we see is that actually the main production we expect to see by 2030 is onshore wind in the west. And then if we move to 2050, I'll just go a bit back. So here I also wanted to state that the median on the highest, on the onshore in the west is around, let's say, 600 terawatt hours. And you will notice, those of you in the back, I'm sorry that it's probably too small for you to read, but when we jump forward, the median is then still around 1,000 in the west, but then we see that the solar and the offshore wind all of a sudden starts coming. We see that the offshore production supersedes the onshore in the north. It really starts coming in, and what we also see is that the south, we are up at a median around 1,000 terawatt hours based on the photovoltaics. But as you can also see, there's quite a span of solutions. There's also some solutions where it's much less and much lower. So this indicates that there is a high uncertainty exactly where we're going to end. We can also show this kind of in terms of looking into what did it mean whether we had a high photovoltaic potential or onshore potential or offshore potential. And can we see this in the results? So what we see here is the correlation between how much renewable electricity production do we have and how much green hydrogen production do we have. Obviously we can see a connection because we do use renewable electricity to produce green hydrogen, but what we also see is that when we're looking in the north, we see the strong correlation between the offshore wind potential and the renewable energy production and the green hydrogen production. So here we see a quite strong correlation. And if we then skip to the others are not quite as clear for the PV and the onshore potentials, but when we look at the south, what we see is that the PV potential then becomes very important. What does this mean, whether the PV potential is high or low? Well, this links directly to social acceptance, right? One of the problems we have with expanding renewable generation is the social acceptance. And in Denmark, we think that Greece and Spain and others are going to build huge amounts of PV everywhere, much more than today. But sometimes I talk to people from the south and they're like, no, it's enough, we're fine. And that's just not the picture we're looking into. Similarly for the wind in the north. So the conclusion on this is that there are huge uncertainties, and maybe we should talk about solution spaces, as I'm trying today, rather than about one or a few optimal solutions. So we have to talk about what is kind of robust. PV in the south seems like a robust solution, and also offshore in the north. Basically what we see is that the west consistently produces most green hydrogen due to the good wind resources and the high hydrogen demand. We see that the south follows in 2050, mainly based on solar resources, and we see that the total the EU targets. And then we see that in 2030, the main electricity production overall comes from onshore wind, but this is then overtaken by offshore wind in the north, and is matched by solar and offshore wind in the west. And then in general, we see an increase in the role of offshore wind by 2050. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marie, for that interesting talk. I particularly like the idea of solution spaces, so really giving room for a discussion to explore more options, more potentials that are location-specific, especially when we're considering renewables and how sensitive generation is to the particular location that you have. And then just talking a little bit about that variation, you also mentioned about, things like social acceptance. So the assumption that there will be lots of solar panels being produced in the south, or wind farms in the north. But again, all of these solutions come at some sort of cost. There's always some sort of trade-off to be had. And so hopefully, these can expand a little bit more about this idea. And this talk will be about the implications of variable renewable energy expansion and biomass utilization for producing renewable fuels in Europe. Please.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to present our work at this conference and in front of this lovely crowd. My name is Thijs Madsen, and I'm a PhD student from the DTU Management Group with previously Langston Lewis and Marie Münster and Johan Kellish, my supervisor, where we looked previously with the FORIA group into generating decarbonization pathways for Europe. Since then, I've moved on to a PhD in looking into power to X markets, which is what my presentation today will be about. And more specifically, we've just heard a lot about the renewable potentials. We've also heard a lot about biomass and certain futures. And this presentation, this work, is about a study on what are the implications of different scenarios for developments in these two resources for producing renewable fuels. I'll try to make it short because I know we're already way above schedule for today. So, if we have the agenda of decarbonizing the hard-to-abate transportation in Europe, primarily talking about the shipping and the aviation sectors, then it requires a shift away from the fossil fuels we use today. And one option that's talked about a lot is the utilization of new liquid renewable fuels. And within this category, there is, roughly speaking, two different pathways you could go. You could either go the biofuel route, which is the more technologically ready route, which also generally have lower costs as we see it. Or you could go the e-fuel route or power to X route. And the difference between these two would be that in biofuel you use biomass as the energy carrier, while in e-fuels, rather hydrogen produced from renewables will be the main energy carrier. But both of these potential pathways have some significant restrictions and limits that need to be taken into account to address the scale-up that we need to in Europe for this work, but also in the whole world. Bioresources is a limited resource. There's uncertainty to the amount of renewable biomass you can have, because you also have competing uses. You also need food. But as we've also just talked about, the expansion of renewables, which is the foundation of most of the decarbonization, all of the decarbonization pathways really we talk about, also has restrictions, because it's not necessarily the case that you can put up all of the solar panels that you might want and that you might see from a model one in Spain. So what we want to look into is how do these restrictions, the availabilities of renewable potentials and biomass, affects the production of renewable fuels. And we do that with a model, which I will not go into detail with, but with an extension that we utilize that we call Optiflow, which is an extension that covers the renewable fuel production. For example, to cover an aviation demand, you could produce a biofuel through a Fischer-Tropsch process, or you could produce an e-kerosene from an Fischer-Tropsch or operate some ethanol. But alternatively, that biomass could be utilized in more conventional combustion in, for example, industry, followed by carbon capture, where you would then utilize the VAE resources to produce renewable hydrogen and then make the fuel that way. And what we want to do with this methodology is to internalize into the modeling framework the decision making between these two options. And we do that by generating scenarios where we vary how much renewable you can build at a regional level and how much biomass you can use at a regional level. In the scenarios from optimistic or high to pessimistic or low scenarios. So jumping straight to the results, the first thing we look into is at an aggregate system level in Europe. What are the implications of these different scenarios in producing renewable fuels? So briefly to explain the meaning of the plot, we present a pathway towards 2050, and then we have 9 different scenarios of different levels of biomass and VRE expansion. So on the very right you have the high biomasses, and then you have sub-columns that show how much VRE you can expand in. And we see, first of all, expectedly, that biomass scarcity is a main driver of food production. We see it is in our models the cheaper alternative. But additionally, we see that the VRE expansion has lower implications on the fuel types we produce, but it has an effect on the utilization of the biomass resources that go into the fuels. So, for example, with high biomass expansion, you could increase the yield in a Fischer-Tropsch process that produces biokerosene. So you get the same amount of fuel yield for lower use of the bioresources. And then we also see that the carbonaceous fuels are prioritized mostly towards the aviation sector, given the opportunity of using ammonia for the ship industry. Looking into a regional level, I know this is a very complex plot, so maybe it's difficult for some of the people in the back, but we look into the S-case scenarios of high and low variations of these two parameters that vary, and see, usually speaking, how does it impact the fuel production and the hydrogen infrastructure and supporting renewable infrastructure. And we see that in this case we consider high biomass and high VRE expansion, where we see that VRE expansion has an impact on the production and export of biofuels. Moving between these two scenarios, reducing the amount of VRE you can expand, you see production shift towards underutilized countries with more potential, such as Sweden and Poland, to remaining countries, while oppositely, if you are in low biomass scenarios, then the shift in trade goes the other way, where decreasing VRE potentials shift production from areas around good wind resources, for example around the North Sea, back to those countries with poor resources. And then another important factor is that we see a significant build-up of hydrogen pipelines across all of the scenarios, but combined scarcity in both parameters exacerbate the needs to utilize our resource on the whole continent, which increases how much pipeline capacity we need, and also there's a risk that we might need additional capacity to serve the same demand by utilizing resources in areas that aren't as good. So if you have to place solar panels in an area where the sun doesn't shine as much, you might need more solar panels to meet the same decarbonization demand. And the last set of results, what does this mean in terms of how to utilize the carbon resources? It's an essential resource both for biofuels and for e-fuels. We see that better VOE expansion conditions can reduce the demand of carbon. In these results, we show two different scenarios with the same high biomass potential, different levels of allowed VOE expansion, where higher VOE expansion reduces the amount of biomass that you need, and speaking back to the potential increased yield that I talked about previously. We also see that higher scarcity increases the competition for carbon molecules. It becomes more crucial to, for example, utilize the pathways that allow for second use, such as combustion in industry, followed by carbon capture and subsequent use to produce fuel. And we also see that restrictive conditions on both increase the need for what I would consider critical and uncertain technologies, such as direct air capture and the need for fossil sequestration instead of biogenic sequestration. So to summarize, our question was how the local resources of VOE expansion and biomass utilization influence the renewable fuel production. And we see that the renewable fuel production is driven mainly by the availability of biomass, and that different directions of trade can occur based on what the scarcity is. We see that higher scarcity scenarios can increase the competition of the carbon resources and also hydrogen infrastructure developments. We see that better conditions for VOE expansion can improve the utilization of carbon resources. And lastly, that restrictive VOE expansion can lead to larger necessary investments due to poorer resource utilizations. Thank you. I'm glad to speak.
Thank you very much for that presentation, Dennis. I thought it was very interesting how you really highlighted the fact that we can actually look at the carbon resources and target them as a leverage point to really promote the use of renewables and further development of the renewables. Also, you touched a little bit on the trade aspect and the market aspect, which I think will become increasingly more relevant as we move into the future. We already talked about the necessity for collaboration and coming together and forming sort of energy sovereignty, but that trade aspect and the location-specific characteristics of what that trade could look like and the markets could look like will be covered by our next speaker, Dr. Ioannis Koutouris, who will speak a little bit more about renewable hydrogen and ammonia production, looking at location-specific considerations and competitive market dynamics in Europe. Yeah.
Yes. So, hello. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ioannis Koutouris, and I recently received my PhD degree from the Technical University of Denmark. And today I'm going to talk about renewable hydrogen and ammonia production and locational specific consideration and competitive market dynamics in Europe. In the beginning, actually, when I was drafting the slides, I wanted to motivate the students today in the auditorium, and I would like to give you some information about my background. Because 10 years ago, or maybe 12, I was also studying in those auditoriums. And today I'm investigating topics about hydrogen. So initially, I finished the National Technical University of Athens in civil engineering, and later on, due to my motivation regarding sustainable energy, I joined DTU for a Master's in Sustainable Energy. Later on, I worked as a consultant for 2 years, investigating topics in renewable energy and hydrogen back then, and that motivated me even further to apply for a PhD position at the Technical University of Denmark, investigating topics about energy economics and hydrogen investments. During my time as a PhD student, I had the opportunity to go to MIT and to investigate topics related to hydrogen regulation, related in the induction to the IRA Act in the And now that I have graduated, I'm a senior consultant with a company called Blue Power Partners, and we're investigating topics of investing in renewables and hydrogen across all over the world. So, to begin with, this is a perspective from my PhD studies. So, we are aware that previous speakers also talk about it, that hydrogen is coming as an emerging commodity, especially in Europe. And to understand its role, we have to dive into 3 different pillars. Firstly, we have the plant level modeling. So we need to understand how the electrolyzer will operate due to the dynamic operations faced by the renewable production. Later on, we have a lot of investments occurring all over Europe, and we need to understand what's the role of hydrogen in industry and what's the regulation related with hydrogen or its study case. And after all, we have a macro level perspective. So in order to understand how countries will link with each other through hydrogen, as we nowadays have with electricity, for example, we need to invest time understand about the macro perspective level modeling of hydrogen. To begin with, we already talked about it. We have a problem, or we can make a hypothesis in the beginning that the competitive supply is located in the periphery of Europe. For instance, in Greece, Italy, Spain, Portugal, we have really good potentials for solar PV production. While in the northern parts of Europe, we are aware that the countries invest a lot into onshore wind and offshore wind. So we know that if we would like to produce hydrogen, most likely we would like to produce it in areas in the periphery of Europe where the competitive supply is good enough. However, the problem and the challenge comes that most of the demand centers that they will utilize the hydrogen to decarbonize their activities are located in the central parts of Europe, like in Germany, Netherlands, some parts in Italy, in the northern parts. So in order to solve that issue, the national transmission system operators of Europe, they envision the grid, an infrastructure of hydrogen that will link supply and demand. And that was a part of my PhD as well, like what other speakers and fellow co-authors talk about it. What are the potential energy infrastructure build-outs to support hydrogen production in an interconnected European energy system towards 2050? When we applied the model Balmorel, actually, we were able to generate scenarios, and some scenarios are related to 2030, others to 2040, and so on. So in the beginning, when we run the model, we see the following picture. In 2030, we see that all the countries in Europe will start having investments in renewable hydrogen. And then, supply and demand centers, they connect with each other through a dedicated pipeline of network. This is the blue line that you probably can see in this plot. However, towards 2050, the whole market is changing. So we see that the model actually prefers to invest into electrolyzer production, mainly in the southern parts of Europe and the UK. In order to understand the dynamics, we need to look at the power sector. How does the power sector look like in 2050? The decreasing costs of solar PV and with coordination with underground hydrogen storage, they save those large southern European hydrogen production centers. Furthermore, blue hydrogen deployment limits the hydrogen infrastructure build-out. By performing this analysis, we can establish that towards 2050, the southern parts of Europe actually they have really been competitive on producing hydrogen in a good price due to the solar PV production. But how does the market look like in 2025? This is a study in 2050, and there is a lot of uncertainty as we heard about. So I would like to talk a little bit about the first hydrogen auction round that happened in 2024. Here you can see results from the auction, and in the descending order, you can see the levelized cost of producing hydrogen in countries all over Europe, as it was documented by the price companies. What you can see is that the average levelized cost across countries spreads from 5.8 euros per kilo up to 30.5 euros per kilo. So while I was on my PhD studies in my degree, I actually started questioning how the European regulation and support mechanism set business models for renewable hydrogen and its derivatives, and why do hydrogen production costs vary across countries and projects in Europe? To do so, we need to understand how hydrogen will be produced in industrial clusters. Here, you can see an example of a flow chart. For instance, you can see, Yeah, you can see the electrolyzer production. So this is like where are we going to split water into hydrogen and oxygen using renewable energy from solar or wind, or we can use energy from the utility grid. Furthermore, the electrolyzer can provide other services, for example, to the grid as well. However, we have a challenge when we model those plants, because on the left-hand side we have an hourly variability, while on the right-hand side we have off-taker agreements. Most of the times, the commodities that we're going to produce, like methanol, ammonia, hydrogen, the off-takers set specific obligations. For instance, if an off-taker is a state plant, maybe you would like to issue hydrogen at a steady rate. So how can we bridge the variability with off-taker obligations given technical constraints of the power-based assets? To do so, during my PhD, I developed a model that is able to handle this complexity and is able to anticipate what kind of investments we should make to accommodate for those off-taker agreements. Furthermore, I applied the model into different locations in ports to estimate ammonia production costs in 2025. The ports that I chose were 4 different ones. One is in Denmark, in Esbjerg. The other is in Germany, in Bremerhaven. In Greece, in Lavrion. In Spain, Barcelona port. Those ports were selected due to different reasons. Firstly, because they have locational characteristics which may vary, as you can see in the table. But also because those ports actually have announced projects for producing ammonia, renewable ammonia, and using it for shipping industry. When we simulate those energy hubs, we can anticipate 2 or 3 different business plans. One, we call it on-grid, where it's a business plan where we invest into the renewable assets, but then we have agreements with renewable producers to receive electricity. Or we have another setup which is called off-grid. We can invest into our own renewable assets and then operate the power-to-X plants. Today I will present you results from the on-grid case by using the model. What you can see here are like levelized costs of producing ammonia that they vary across scenarios and locations. And I would like to guide you a little bit through the results. Firstly, when we observe the port of Barcelona, we see that the power purchasing agreement that somebody can establish in 2025, it costs like 50 euros per megawatt hour, while in Denmark it costs 81 euros. However, when we observe the plot, the contribution of the power purchasing agreement in each case it differs. The difference comes because in Denmark the model suggests that we want a hybrid scenario where we establish a power purchasing agreement and we harvest electricity from the day-ahead market. This is happening because the prices in Denmark for the day-ahead market are frequently low. So the model suggests that it's more competitive to harvest electricity from 2 different resources. While in Barcelona, the day-ahead market prices, they don't fluctuate as much as in Denmark. Furthermore, if we move into the Greek case, in Lavrion, for instance, in Greece, even if we would like to harvest electricity from the day-ahead market, then we can observe that the prices are actually really high. And even if the prices were quite lower, as expected like in Denmark, the emissions in the grid are high enough. So we will end up producing hydrogen that cannot be considered as renewable eventually due to the recent delegated acts. Furthermore, I would like to talk a little bit about tariffs. So in every country, when you purchase electricity, you have to pay costs to the transmission system operator. We can see that, for example, in countries such as Germany and Denmark, the tariffs are quite significant. While in Greece, for example, with the transfer investments, the tariffs are quite lower, and that creates a good opportunity actually for producing ammonia in this case. Overall, when we estimate an on-grid study case, the capex, like the investment expenditures to the assets, looks to be limited in comparison with off-grid study cases. And I would like to give you an example from the modeling results, which is for the Lavrion port. When we have an off-grid planning setup, the cost of producing ammonia seems to be almost the same as in an on-grid case. However, it's mainly capex oriented. So if there is uncertainty due to the capex, then the cost that you see here will also change as well. However, this is an analysis that happened in academia, and we're using open source data to perform this analysis. And we're talking about megawatt scale plants. However, the ambition that we have is gigawatt scale plants. I would like to talk a little bit about my experience from the private sector. So nowadays I'm working for a company called Group Our Partners in Denmark, and we have established more than 200 projects at the moment, mainly into renewable energy and electrolysis. And I would like to tell you that the industry recognizes the complexity of techno-economic modeling for power lakes. And we invest and adopt those models, but however, we want to tailor them to project-specific demands. I would like to talk a little bit how we can see from a megawatt scale perspective to a gigawatt scale perspective. What you can see here is a similar layout. We want to produce ammonia for an off-taker agreement, a shipping company, for example. And we have the same components, like power sourcing, electrolysis, ammonia, storages, and so on and so forth. However, when we move to a financial investment decision, we have to assess even more complex details. For instance, when we talk about power sourcing, we can have multiple PPAs, like power purchase agreements, that they may vary for capacity, strike prices, and tenures. We may also have the opportunity of investing in our own renewable assets. However, the capex may be uncertain, or we have to face other uncertainties about logistics and supply chain. We may have the opportunity to source electricity from the direct market. However, we have to evaluate the merchant exposure because we're talking about projects of 30 years horizon and more than 1 billion euros investment. So the decimal even matters. Furthermore, moving into the gigawatt scale, the technological uncertainty. Like a gigawatt scale project will have a unique degradation strategy and most likely will be influenced by the electrolyzer provider. We have technical bottlenecks of the power fixed assets and of course the capex uncertainty. Overall, I would like to tell you also another perspective from a gigawatt scale plants that we don't have only one off-taker. When you build a gigawatt plant, you will have multiple off-takers that they want to receive your product. For instance, 2 shipping companies are willing to buy ammonia, but for different prices, and then they have a different schedule for delivery as well. So every time one of those bullets changes, you have to reevaluate the whole investment plan. I would like to conclude this presentation into 3 different dimensions. As I talked about, from a macro level perspective, we observe that by 2040 and 50, solar-based hydrogen in Southern Europe outcompetes offshore wind-based hydrogen in the north and creates those 4 unique corridors that we see before. From a plant level perspective, we have competitive locations in Europe that can leverage regional characteristics and specific cost components are key drivers for competitive investments in 2025. And when we move into the gigawatt scale and how the industry perceives that, first the industry adopts state-of-the-art modeling techniques. What we have discussed today is something that we actually use in the industry. And furthermore, when we move to the gigawatt scale, we increase complexity and project-specific details influence investment decisions. I would like to thank you for your attention and
Thank you very much for that presentation, guys. We've talked a lot this morning about collaboration, but what does that actually look like in actuality? How do we operationalize it? And I think you've highlighted some very key aspects that we really need to start thinking about, both in terms of infrastructure and financial instruments. So thank you for that. So to close the session, I would like to throw a question to the panel and to hear an answer from each of your perspectives. One key thing that has come out from all the presentations is about the large discrepancy, both in terms of the different types of renewable energy being produced and used in Stavros' presentation, to also the different discrepancies in terms of the location, the geographic regions that were highlighted by both Marie and Ace, and also looking at the markets as highlighted by Giannis now. Earlier today, the Honorable Minister talked about the national level, talking about different countries, some who are front runners and some who will not be named, not pulling their weight. From your perspective, what key point, what key recommendation could you give as to how we can close that gap going forward? And I'll start with you, Stavros, just since you were up.
A lot to recommend in the technical manner because in the end, all the discussions come up with a conclusion that says that the technology is here and the science is here, but it comes to political decisions on how we can collaborate and bring the knowledge and the availability together rather than compete with each other to which country is going to gain more profit out of it. So I believe that we have the knowledge, we have the technology, and we need to use it.
Thank you. So the technology is here, the will is potentially lacking. Maria.
Yes, thanks for the question. I think that it's important that we look at motivating the demand side. So I think it's very important that we have this European regulation that starts to demand use of e-fuels. And I think this way we need to also motivate industry to change and so on. So we need brave politicians who can send clear signals about the way they're going, because these are huge investments, and we need brave investors then to follow up, and they need to be able to trust the policies of the politicians to hold and to continue the path that we have laid forward. And then I think that what we've also seen in other results is that there can be a huge benefit of first movers in terms of starting this learning, the technology learning. And what does the learning mean? The learning means that we adapt, and once we have a substantial amount of investments, then we start to learn to produce more efficiently, and we get down the learning curve, and we have cheaper costs, higher efficiencies, longer lifetimes, and so on. So I think that we need brave politicians who can also support this first mover, and of course we know that once we've built infrastructure, we're probably going to use it, like the roads. So if we have brave politicians that move in this respect, probably we are also going to keep on using the infrastructure that we built for that purpose. Let's say from Greece to Germany. So I think that we need brave politicians and good frameworks to get this started, because we've been talking about this for a long time, and now we need to start moving down the road.
Thank you, Maria. So brave first movers, both from the political side but also from the investment and the market side.
Yes, and we also need to continue to support the collaboration that we already do in Europe, and also not only in Europe, but we also need to make sure that we protect that collaboration, because the power system is, for example, the backbone of all of the decarbonization pathways we talk about, whether it's direct electrification or if it's through Power-to-X now or at some point. We have, for example, in Denmark, we're situated next to Norway, which has good hydro resources that can complement really well our wind power. So that gives a flexibility in the system that becomes crucial to utilize as much as we can in the future when intermittency is going to become even higher.
Great, thank you. So really recognizing the existing relationships and collaborations and trying to protect those as we also move to the weekend.
Yes, my perspective, I would say, first of all, European Commission sets ambition targets. We're talking about 100 gigawatts of electrolysis in 2030, and at the moment at least, only 4.5 are installed in 2025 in Europe. So that means that there is a huge gap between expectations and reality. And the reason is that 100 gigawatts of electrolyzer demands billions of euros to be invested. So first of all, we need a framework, as Marie suggested, that investors feel safe about it. We need to estimate what's the demand, and then how we can actually have a willingness to pay for an alternative fuel. That could be from either providing subsidies or taxation, but we need to have a framework to start raising the demand for renewable hydrogen. Otherwise, it's going to be really tough to achieve those targets. And overall, we should consider that Europe is one entity, but China and other countries are progressing as well into hydrogen technology. Maybe we need to learn from those as well and try to adapt our systems. That's my perspective.
Great, thank you. So, creating an enabling environment to facilitate not just a policy push, but also a market pull, and learning from outside of Europe to see best practice. I think that's a very positive note to end on. So, join me in thanking the esteemed panel that we had with expert presenters. A round of applause. Thank you once again, we really appreciate your contribution. So let's take a short 15-minute coffee break because then we can come back at 1:15 to start the next session. Thank you.
Καλημέρα, κυρία Κουντούλη. Υπέροχη κυρία Κουντούλη.
Ποιος μου μιλά? Ποιος μου μιλά? Σοφοκλή δεν θα έρθεις εδώ, εσύ μου μιλάς. Πού είσαι, παιδί μου? Λοιπόν, let's have our final panel. My good friend, Professor Sophocles Magritis, is talking to me virtually, and I was kind of surprised, like the voice of God, Sophocles. Anyway, I'm excited to introduce these panelists. These are people that have spent their lives on energy transformations, energy systems transformations. So I would like to call on stage Spiros Economou. I know Spiros for almost decades. He led a very important institution in Greece on energy transition, and now he's the Director General of UNIS Hydrogen Technologies. UNIS is one of the most important energy companies in the country. Then is my friend and colleague from DTU, Professor Doan Geles, Head of Energy, Economics and Modeling section of DTU. He has done, like Marie Munster did, an amazing job in creating a powerful ecosystem at DTU on climate modeling and economics, and I learned a lot from him over the past 2-3 years. Then is Dr. Anastasia Maria Moscovi, Head of Research and Innovation at Monolithos. She will explain what Monolithos does. I think it's extremely interesting what they do and how important they became in the ecosystem of the transition. Vincent Pirot, Sales Manager, Middle East, Anglo-Belgian Corporation, that they have a vivid presence in Greece. And finally, the voice from the computer, my good friend Sophocles Magritis, professor at the University of Athens, and one of the leading hydrogen experts in the country. So Sophocles, I am disappointed that you are not here, but I know that you will visit us very soon because we are starting a lot of collaboration initiatives and projects together. So I will pose some questions and I will ask the panelists to give us their thoughts, but feel free to, ask questions between you and make sure that we have a vivid, let's say, discussion. So, Spiro.
I have prepared three slides.
Of course, please. You want to make a statement before the discussion. The floor is yours.
thank you for, first of all, I would like to thank the innovator and disruptor, Professor Kouduris here. Dear professors, dear colleagues, I'm very glad to be here with you. And now you worry about green hydrogen. So let's say you've been here from 9 o'clock in the morning, we have a bus with diesel, burning here, and a bus with hydrogen. How would you feel? Which one would you prefer? Of course, with closed doors, we would have died, right? With the diesel one, with hydrogen. So, hydrogen, you hear, let me for a minute say it's green, gray, pink, whatever. Hydrogen is odorless. You cannot smell, you cannot see, right? It is based on how it's produced. Green is produced by renewable energy sources, gray is produced with fossil fuels, blue when we have carbon capture and storage. So if I can go very shortly with the presentation. Okay, thank you. You know, thank you for this. So we are for 7 go one before, the previous, the first one. It's okay, thank you. So hydrogen has a strategic period in Europe and Greece. Another statement I want to do. Do you expect to do energy transition? Okay, of course, but it's a matrix. No energy transition will happen without digital transition and industrial transition. Keep it on mind, these three areas: energy, digital, industrial transition go part by part. So hydrogen is a strategic pillar in Europe, and Greece is something next one please. So I have been the Director General for UNIS. I have a background of advanced energy systems. And now we are focusing in integrating green hydrogen into industrial mobility at the factories. UNIS has already has 4 European projects, 24/7 ZEN project, trying to decarbonize natural gas grid and the electricity grid. We have CREAH-2, it's a small-scale value based on Crete to produce 500 tons of hydrogen. The Crete Valley, also with Professor Marinakis, I'll show you a slide, and CLH2 Valley is a valley in Lyon with that we will contribute with our experience. So now you see all the technologies we try to incorporate with NTUA, and Professor Marinakis I mentioned because he's a very close friend of Professor Kouduris. So as you see, we will have technologies, digital twin, okay, we will have digital twin here. We want to increase energy, flexibility. We want to cover summer periods where we have extra demand, but also extra power from solar PV. And we need to electrify EV fleet, hydrogen buses, and this comes from another project. So what we want to do as UNIS as a system integrator, we're going to integrate electrolyzers, but also compression, storage, a huge field for Europe to cover, to become a leader in industry transition. And then we will have 2 routes. The first route you see with the fuel cells. With the fuel cells we can produce green electricity. So we can decarbonize the electricity grid starting low, but it can be megawatt or gigawatt order. And then we can have also a fuel with buses. So actually we use hydrogen with electric buses which take the electricity from fuel cells. So what they need is just, they consume hydrogen, they need water. And so we use both electrons and the molecules. So the challenge is that Europe needs 10 million tons of hydrogen by 2030. As we said, we have the minister that 27 million tons of gray hydrogen
emit 30 million tons of CO2. This is not the case here, because we want to have 30 million tons, and we need corridors. We need corridors from, I would be big in my thinking, from the Emirates, from Saudi Arabia, going through Israel to Cyprus and Greece. The Eastmed project is still under negotiation, Cyprus, Greece, and then the southeast corridor going up from the Balkans up to Germany. So the Greece and ECP, the National Energy and Climate Plan, which focuses on this, we have green hydrogen to decarbonize our electricity sectors, and the opportunity is to position Greece as a southeastern European hub. And UNIS is upscaling this project so that from 500 tons we can go up to 50,000 tons by installing electrolyzers in Crete, 250 megawatt, and another 250 megawatt in Cyprus.
Is there any actual investment already made?
No, we have already applied for the 10-year National Development Plan. So these projects have been listed in the National Development Plans of ENSOGAS. And now we have applied for a project of common interest, and we received support from the Ministry of Energy from Cyprus, and we received support in Ministry from the Regulatory Authority in Greece, and we expected from the Ministry of Energy, Environment and Energy in Greece. We already had it in the 10-year National Development Plan. So it's a call to action, and Greece must lead, not be a follower. And it's a strategic alignment with financing tools and collaborations. And if you remember computers, starting when I was a student, the computer started Steve Jobs, Bill Gates. I was in '84, I was entered the university, and the computers started then. And Elon Musk also went on the surf saying, I'm not going to do my PhD in material science in Stanford. If you read his biography, I'm going to invest in the internet. So, it's a question mark. Maybe this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to save the future of energy. Thank you. That's all.
So, I want to ask you a few questions, so we have some interaction. So, Spiro, what do you think is the critical regulatory interventions or transformations or changes that need to take place in order to create a transparent and investment-friendly environment for hydrogen in Greece first, and maybe then in the European Union?
As far as I know, I have been, as you mentioned, I have been involved in forming the national green hydrogen strategy, and we expect it. So the European Commission is not happy, so the Greek government should release the national green hydrogen strategy by June. So we already follow the European strategy. So we have regulations there, as said. So the Fit for 55.
Fit for 55.
We have the Clean Industrial Deal for EU hydrogen industry. We have the Renewable Energy Directive. We have the hydrogen and the carbonized market package, and all this is a very well-structured regulatory framework, which should focus, first of all, for the grid and infrastructure development. We need to have standards for, and also to have hydrogen-ready grid. Then we have to guarantee to have certification. Green hydrogen needs guarantees of origin to be confident that it will be green. No other types of hydrogen production will be financed by the European Union. And also for the cross-border, we need projects of common interest, and we need standardization so all networks are very tolerant between each other. So it is to have, we need also to have stability, to attract investment, and
Yes, but Spiro, we have the European BPL, we have the Fit for 55, we have the laws, the European laws. And this can by definition be transposed to national laws.
that we miss. We still miss. We do not have the national regulatory framework for hydrogen.
This is what I want you to say. So that they can, yes.
We do have only for hydrogen fueling stations, published in 2022, and now that we want to develop our projects, we are treated, hydrogen is not treated as a renewable source, and gives us issues where to have this installation.
And another question that I need a sincere answer. I'm also part of this climate change commission of the energy department that produces the National Energy and Climate Plan. And in there we have hydrogen for specifically decarbonization of industry and synthetic fuels. Are you happy with that pathway?
It should be quantified.
You should.
It should be quantified.
Companies that are leading the energy transition, you should make your voice loud and clear to the government.
Yes, actually we have already provided to the government policies for electrolyzers. So we need to invest in the European industry to produce electrolyzers, to produce fuel cells. Then we have given our policy measures to use infrastructure, but also the use. So if you want to purchase a hydrogen car, it should be financed, right?
Okay. Thank you very much, Piero. We will come back. So, Dawn, how do we have to develop and increase our electricity infrastructure to meet hydrogen demand? And can we stay with the current European electricity network? What is needed?
Yes, I mean the incident, very short answer to the second question is, the incident yesterday shows the current European electricity network is not sufficient to make us at least safe against blackouts. But I will come to that in more detail. But what we need first about your first question was, we want to have renewable fuels to get the full decarbonization of the shipping sector, the transport sector, but also chemicals and steel and so on. We need hydrogen and green fuels, right? But this hydrogen and green fuel must be renewable, otherwise we will not scrap the emissions. And this requires, we made a recent study where I was on an advisory board about the total capacity. We have also seen that in the slides of my colleagues today. We have 300 gigawatt, almost 300 gigawatt solar in Europe right now, which is a lot, you know, compared to 15 years ago when I started my PhD. But also, almost 300 gigawatt we have wind capacity in Europe. But the studies show that we have to triple the wind capacity until 2050 and at least 5 times the current PV capacity. We are already facing acceptance issues, financing issues, but especially permission issues with onshore wind. In some areas there's also still some opposition is forming against solar, at least in Germany and Denmark is some discussion going on. But onshore is very under pressure, while we have to triple the capacity, you know, wind. And there are many districts or many regions of Europe are complaining to having already a lot, but if we want to have our climate targets, we want to seriously reach them, we need to find a solution. You know, going offshore, going remote solar is one solution, but it gets more costly. So we need to develop all the 3 VRE or variable resources together. But if we develop them, then the job is only to third or half done, because we need all get the electricity transported throughout Europe. You mentioned the corridors for hydrogen. Yes, we need the hydrogen corridors, but our analysis showed also we have to triple the interconnector capacities in Europe, you know. I mean, now coming back to the incident from yesterday, one reason why I think, and we don't know the reasons yet, but what I read so far is that, you know, island systems and peninsulas are more vulnerable than the Central Europe, right? We had an incident 4 or 5 years ago in Germany where, due to some mistrading activities, the grid was about to collapse, you know, because German reserves were not able to cover the imbalance in the system.
Yeah, I see.
But what then happened is that then the German TSOs called the neighboring TSOs to deliver reserves, and the system was saved without anyone, except the experts, knowing about it, you know. But in the connection which we have in Spain to France is limited, you know, around 2 gigawatt, and this is so they cannot fully benefit from the large European system if they are not enough connected. And there are discussions going on for more interconnectors, but it's just too slow. So what we need is we need to speed up the electricity infrastructure that can then deliver the green hydrogen and the green fuels, right? So there's a lot to be done on that end.
Yeah. You know, when I am at the European Commission and I'm part of many discussions about the design of the policies and of that, what you just mentioned, first, the heterogeneity, not just geospatial heterogeneity, but also cultural, technological, geopolitical, climatic, locational, all of this. And then the cost effectiveness, doing away the risk of collapse of the interconnection, are two things that are difficult to balance. Plus, I'm constantly under the impression that the fact that Central Europe does not have the renewables, they are wind in the north and solar in the south, and Central Europe is the heart, core of the financial Europe, and I'm talking to you who lived in Germany and was an academic in Germany for many, many years. I am feeling that these geopolitical pressures of who is owning the future resources and who will have to bear the transport cost are also obstacles in balancing the trade-off between heterogeneity and the cost-effectiveness of interconnection. There is also this political imbalance that is complicating things. It's very subtle. It's always the elephant in the room. Nobody says, no German politician says that we don't want that because we don't have any. We don't want solar because we don't have any. But it is the elephant in the room constantly. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you're right, the heterogeneity can be a blessing, but can be also a curse when it comes to policymaking. Technically, it's helpful, I would say, because just imagine you have in one part a lot of renewables, then we have the French system, which still builds on nuclear. We have the hydro in the Alps, or in Norway, or in mountainous countries. So the heterogeneity, technically, that's good, that helps, you know, that to diversify and be then also having...
Hedges against the risks.
But at the same time, as the countries are technologically so different, they have different interests. And that's what makes policymaking, at least as I can observe, in Brussels quite difficult. You know, I mean, there was a huge, long discussions until we got this EU taxonomy on the green hydrogen, and the main reason was that nuclear-driven countries like France, they wanted to have the nuclear power-based hydrogen also green, and some gas-driven countries, they wanted to have a sort of a low-carbon component in the green taxonomy. So all these different interests, I mean, at the end, that's the good point of Europe, you know, we find a consensus. At some point we find a consensus, but it takes sometimes very, very long discussions and years to get there. And now, if we think about support policies, we are still facing that you know, some countries are asking for support for renewables, or at least Brussels to allow not you know, to have competition low solar. So some countries are asking to be able to support offshore wind, etc., while France and Sweden is, you know, lobbying for nuclear subsidies. So we have this bit mismatched interest coming from the systems.
You know what I say to my children about Europe? It's like football, where you have two teams, let's say two big parts, 11 players each, or a number of players, and at the end of the day, Germany wins.
Yeah, it was at least in my childhood. We were very good in winning. The recent years were in football not the best, but when it comes to policy, yeah, it's, I mean, at least we need some core countries in Central Europe to agree as being the main demand centers on different policies. And it's especially when I see, you know, if some players like France, Germany, Netherlands, and some in the center of Europe, of the EU agree, then policy making becomes much faster. But mostly, a lot of policy is delayed when France and Germany disagrees. And that's a burden.
It's important that these fast policies do not only reflect the interest of Central Europe.
But one point about...
because often Europe, for example, has a huge potential for huge, but still contained.
Yeah, and that's what also Yanis and Tyson showed us in the, you know, we are very arguing for the pro-European cost-efficient solution, because that makes them at the end also payable, right? I mean, a lot of the now, let's say, opposition against energy transition, also by the right populist parties are able to pick up, that is the cost increase, right? The increase in electricity prices. So we can continue. I mean, Germany, out of this 300 gigawatt, 100 gigawatt of solar is in Germany. So it has been pushed, and it was good at the beginning to subsidize, to get the cost down. We are down in cost now. But it's much more efficient to install solar power in big scale in the south of Europe than installing that in balconies and rooftops in Germany. I mean, that's what is happening at the moment. A lot of people install. My friends and my family in Germany, they are installing all because it pays off, you know. I said, but from a system perspective, it's not the best solution. It will be much, yeah.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thank you, Doc. Dr. Anastasia Maria is the head of research and innovation at Monolithos. Like I said, first, Anastasia, I would like you to quickly introduce Monolithos. It's important for me so that people know what you do and why you are important in the ecosystem. And then I want you to, you know, give us your ideas from the industrial perspective. What are the main barriers to the deployment of hydrogen, and how the Greek ecosystem, industrial ecosystem, which is basically an SME-based ecosystem, and SMEs is the backbone of Europe anyway. More than 96-97% of our companies in Europe are SMEs. So they are very important. So how this ecosystem of SMEs can be a driver, a way, what is the way that they can work together in order to mobilize the hydrogen source of energy if it is a good idea to be mobilized?
First of all, good afternoon, and thank you for the invitation of Monolithos in this ecosystem. I have a presentation. I won't do the whole presentation. I will stick to one slide only. I have brought the company's profile. Good afternoon also to the audience. We are just before the lunch, so please for your patience. We are an SME company, which means that we are doing the dirty work of what we are designing here. You put the frame, you design the frame, the laws, the norms, the directions, but somehow somebody has to produce hydrogen. Someone has to construct a machine for producing hydrogen, like what Professor said, the minister in the morning, that we need to know how to deliver hydrogen. So we need to know how to produce it. And we are in the implementation part. We are located in Athens. We are an industrial company, and I want you to see exactly what we are doing. We are producing the materials for the implementation. And here are some difficulties concerning Europe and the supply chain. In order to produce hydrogen, you know the laws, you know the norms, you know how, when it is mostly needed, and then we need to install a unit to produce it. So we need to design for high capacity, and we need material for this. You need materials for food, so we need material for this as well. Here we come to find these materials for the fuel cells and the electrolyzers. These are most probably words that you have not heard before because they are too technical. But they are raw materials. They are materials that they are needed. And for European Union, they are considered critical and strategic because they are come from third countries. I didn't hear today anything about critical raw materials. It is a list of materials that are of great importance and risk for the European Union because the supply chain is not constant. They come from South Africa, they come from Russia, and now due to the war in Ukraine, we have some deficiency of these materials, so we cannot implement either the electrification because we don't have lithium, and we cannot implement hydrogen transition due to lack of materials that come from Russia and from South Africa. And this is where you should come also, find ways to decouple Europe from third countries. If we need the transition, and we have to collaborate, yes, we need to collaborate, or we need to find ways, or we need to recycle. This is the way, because we have a lot of sources, we consume a lot, and what happens after, at the end of their life? This is where an SME can come, and this is where collaboration can come with institutions. We can find the material from recycling, and this is the circular economy model that ERMA norms have been launched from European Union, the Raw Materials Act, that we should act within a circular economy model. What is being disposed, we need to recycle for the same purpose. Either this, or what should we do after the implementation of the plan? We need to produce hydrogen, we need the devices. What is the plan for the waste that will be produced by hydrogen technology? It's the same like batteries. You will buy your Tesla, and after 10 years, the large battery needs somehow to be disposed. If it is not buried or exported in third countries for repurposing, we need to recycle it somehow. And this is where the SMEs come, and we do the implementation of all the innovations that can happen in the university, in the business institutions, and by chance we also produce innovation and we extend somehow in our network. I thought I made the connection with the first of your question with our I hope it was not too technical.
No, it was very nice. And most of the people here are very technical. So
Ah, okay. Yes.
So, do you need that Greek SMEs can play a vital role in Southern Europe?
Not only in Southern, what we normally say from industrial perspective and point of view is, in the academia, if you find out that something works, you go and you try to find out how it works, all the fundamental principles behind the phenomenon, etc.
Yeah, but academia does not have that patterns.
Exactly.
Yeah.
On the other side, in industry, what we do is when something works, we do not care. If it works and if it is profitable, even if 5% more than the state-of-the-art and benchmark, for us it is profit, and we do not investigate and explore why it doesn't work. So in SME, it is necessary to make the connection between the findings to the implementation. In our case, I can give an example. We are an SME, which means that we are a small enterprise, below the 50 people personnel, but we produce innovation. We have more than 40 European funding projects, and also in hydrogen technology applications, and we try to bring as faster and as much as possible the innovation to products, because this is our bread, let's say. So we have great rates of implementation of all the technologies, and this is where we can, the interface that we can connect.
Anastasia, you can find investors immediately?
We need
so you have the technology, maybe you have the patent somewhere in some other country. You find investors immediately to accelerate the market? No.
You need to grow the company, you need to grow the technology. You have to persuade that the technology exists, works, it has perspectives. You need to communicate to the language of the investors, and it's not always easy to find investors within the borders. Most probably you can find investors or angels outside Greece and Europe, but I think the persuasion and the perspective of your technology is the investment, not what works now, but what will work in the future.
Very nice, very nice. So, Nobilia, are you there? Can I see you on screen? Okay, I can see Vincent. Hello, Vincent, how are you? Very nice to see you. Can you out his? Okay, excellent. So, some more technical questions. Can an old-fashioned combustion engine become part of the solution for the use of hydrogen?
The answer is yes, of course. Thank you for inviting me first, and we've been invited as ABC for a very long time in these panels about hydrogen. What I saw for the last years is that a lot of people are talking about one part of the system, not the entire system. What I'm talking about here, I've been listening to people here, the production of hydrogen in wind farms in the North Sea is very complicated. It's very difficult because you cannot start and stop an electrolyzer like that, so you need a very, very long time. It's something which is still physically very, very complicated. On the other side, when we're talking about ammonia for the shipping, well, ammonia for the shipping, it's still not working very fine for the propulsion. And if it's working, if it will work for propulsion, it will only be for the two-stroke engine, not for the four-stroke engine. So you see, technically speaking, it's not yet over. And the entire chain needs to be taken into account. Just about this very old-fashioned combustion engine, it has not even been taken into account by the European Union. everybody's talking about fuel cell, rare materials and so on.
Or turbines.
Yeah. Yeah, we have this 2.6 megawatt combustion engine which use only recycled material, no rare material, nothing. And the cost of capex and opex of that kind of thing is 18 times, I said, well, 18 times less than fuel cell. So, technologically speaking, there's still movement. Even in electrolyzer, it needs a huge amount of energy to produce the hydrogen. I hope that the next generation of scientists will bring us something which will be completely different, and which will allow us to lower the cost of the hydrogen, because this is the problem in Europe, is that when we talk of the full CMB, which is a very large ship order part with ABC for the production of the engine, what is the cost of the hydrogen in Northern Europe? It's about 10 to 12 euro the kilo. It's huge. We are talking here about brave investors, I heard. Well, when you come with that kind of cost, and we have to compete against Chinese product or whatever, it's very complicated to be brave and to expect some return on investment which will be in 30 years. That's not easy. So this is very complex material, and I'm very, very happy to be there today. But we think that at our small level of very small SMI, as you said also probably before, we can contribute to help sustainable route for Europe.
Okay. Vincent, do you want to say a few words about the Anglo-Belgian Corporation, please?
Oh, yes.
What is your mission?
Yeah,
and how people here can work with you?
Yeah, it's a small Belgian company we are building, producing and of course engineering engines, combustion engines with methanol, with hydrogen, diesel, gas, all kind of fuels. And we produce now an engine which can burn each kind of fuel. It's just changing of the injectors. And this 100% Holy Grail combustion engine on hydrogen is working for the last 3 years already, so it's in the market, you can buy it. We sell it to Taiwan, so it's working very fine.
Okay, that's very impressive. So we're not talking about TRLs, this is a product.
Yes, absolutely. It's working fine, and it has been approved by the classification companies, type approved, so everybody can take it and just make it. It's actually the Holy Grail. The only problem is that the hydrogen is costing much more money, and it's too expensive for the moment to run it. But we have a nice project which could come out of the ground in Saudi Arabia, where they produce in NEOM already hydrogen at $2 a kilo.
Very interesting. We also have a project for shipping and hydrogen. Maybe we could see whether what you have can be fitted in an integrated manner, not just start on a ship, but integrated energy sources on ships.
We have already in the port of Antwerp one tugboat which is called the Hydrotug, which is a new fuel tugboat. It's running, it's sailing already, so it's already done. So this is something that is not a project. You can come to Antwerp, you visit the boat, it's running so far. We have 4 more tugboats in building in Japan for the Japanese government on the fuel hydrogen. So it's maybe a small part, but this is our contribution to the big system. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Vincent. We should stay in touch. Finally, I have my friend Sophocles Makridis, professor at the University of Patras, and one of the few people that I know that is engaged in a lot of companies, all or almost all having to do with hydrogen. So Sophocles, when we announced the European Deal, the President of the Commission said Europe has to prepare to become a hydrogen-based economy by 2030. Does this make any sense? What the hell? We cannot hear you and we see you moving.
Vivi.
Yes, now we can hear you.
You don't see me?
We see you as well. Can you hear me? But are you moving?
Yes, no, I'm at the hospital.
Are you at the hospital? Why?
Because I got an accident.
What did you have?
Accident, I make my children speak.
Okay, can you speak or not?
I can speak, of course.
Okay, so tell me, can we be a hydrogen-based economy in Europe?
Exactly, and more. So, look at this. You may ask me some questions I sent you already before, and I can answer them for today.
No, I want you to, the question that you sent me is where is hydrogen heading? In what applications? What is sustainability heading? What are the reasons for its changes? And priorities of America. But before you tell me all that, I want you to tell me whether you think that Europe can by 2030 be prepared to become a hydrogen-based economy like we announced in 2019, December, when we announced the European Green Deal. Is it doable?
Okay, but you know, you have said in the last conference I participated with you as an invited speaker that 2030 is too late for us. So, with this, then, we are very good friends and colleagues in R&D for many years. Mr. Tamarimate! So, President is one of the most experts in maritime application and unfortunately, I thought it was a real-time process for showing to you some videos I brought with me to bring them there. But unfortunately, the hospital cannot change my scheduled treatment.
Yeah, I understand. But just give us your opinion.
My opinion is the following. We can be large players in hydrogen because we have a lot of seawater. At this moment, maritime application and through Athens, that is why I propose to Vincent to talk about Athens. I saw that now he's in Abu Dhabi and I'm not right. Vincent?
No, I'm in between two flights in Schiphol, but I'm going to Egypt where they have a lot of hydrogen also.
Okay, so you are working on me. The issue is the following. Do we have the ability and the money to build exactly what we are thinking? The answer is absolutely yes. I will share with you some videos so that you can. I think that I have already sent it to you through Viber, Philip, but I will send it again to Mary. Now, what is the issue here? We have one way to produce carbon. This is electronics. There is no other way at this moment, except of some special, let's say, treatments like plasma electrolysis. Plasma electrolysis don't make, it takes the hydrogen, not burnings,
it made it very cold at very high temperature, and then you have much more efficiency than photovoltaics or wind turbines. Since photovoltaics have only 1.7 million watt-hour per megawatt, for a megawatt, we have much more with electrolysis as a dolphin. Yamaha, where we have a very close collaboration, sorry for that, I'm in a meeting. What I'm saying is that one moment, please. Hydrogen at this moment is a key player, not because I say that, but because Trump put it in this direction through Elon Musk's investment in batteries. Batteries, they need palladium. Palladium is one of the best metal material that can be used for hydrogen storage and compression systems. So they need that. One way is that. The second one is that Yamaha has already built a boat, so we don't have to make the well-known research development and saying that we make innovation and all these kind of stupidities of European unity. Why I'm saying that? Because European Union is the bureaucracy. It doesn't make decisions. You see how they start under Trump. Sorry, do I interrupt you? Without Trump's decision. When he put this high standard of taxation, and taxation, you know that they could go from 80 euros per kilo of CO2, it would go to 700. Very easy. So, the process is important. We produce hydrogen, we store it, we compress it, not with tubes and distribution systems. It doesn't work efficiently, and then that is why I prefer Athens to be a partner. And at this moment, we have, colleague, one moment I speak on the conference.
Okay, so for me, just conclude. So the last step of the process is?
The last process is to make the distribution system. How it will be done that? We compress hydrogen, not by tubes around Europe. Compress vision can spoke with you in such way.
Yes, he introduced the technology. Okay, let me stop you there because your sound is a bit difficult as well. I understood what you said. It's a very applied version coming from an applied engineer who wants to do things quickly and market-based, and you always talk like that, which is very helpful, of course, but also allows me to pose the last question to the two panelists that are instituted here and close the conference with that. When Sophocles was talking, he said, not like the EU says, which is very bureaucratic, but let's go market-driven and produce the technologies and bring them into application as fast as possible. Now, again, there is a trade-off. Usually, regulation is there to facilitate and accelerate transition. Of course, regulation can be bureaucratic and slow to get agreement on, and sometimes slow market incentives because it's unstable, because it's ambiguous, because it's not efficient enough. What would you say if you had to answer the question, do we need more regulation in Europe or less regulation, like, for example, in the US?
I would say, hydrogen is a product that is in a or green hydrogen, if we take it like that, to be more precise, it's in a very early market penetration phase, and as economists, there's an innovation in this very early market introduction phase will not work just with free market, rules and mechanisms. So we need the regulation to define what green hydrogen is. That is done. And the next step is to go, as we did it with the renewables, as we did with battery storages 10 years ago, with the renewables 20 years ago, we need the market introduction penetration phase subsidies, that brings down, we have now a cost of 11 to 12 euros, we heard from Vincent, for European production of hydrogen per kilogram. But I have to say, if you look back, the photovoltaic cost, when I started my PhD, it was more than 50 euro cents per kilowatt hour. It was more than 10 times what it is today. So this early, and you can blame Germany for a lot of things, but not for the subsidies it gave to bring down. It was really that subsidies that brought down globally the cost. And now, and also the Chinese subsidies to the companies, etc. Now we have a very low level, and it is the cheapest technology. We don't need any subsidies anymore for solar PV. It's there, it's built everywhere. It's going. The same as batteries. 10 years, 12 years ago, we had a huge, at least for electric cars with subsidies, and Norway still tax credits and so on. The have them still in place, and they are getting, but then soon. Now I learned the other day that BYD, the Chinese producers, are going to bring a car onto the market for 16,000 euros, no electric car, no diesel car, no gasoline car can compete with that. So in a few years we will not need any sort of subsidies. And hydrogen, and so we have the left sectors which to decarbonize, that is, we talk about the hard topics a lot. And we need in the early phase the subsidies, and I would say more generic subsidies at the very beginning, but then later targeted to the sectors where we don't get them through. Agriculture, we have still agricultural subsidies for diesel. Agro-diesel, it was a big farmers' opposition last year in Brussels, in Germany, in France, you remember, everywhere, when the farmers should pay diesel, or the tax credits to diesel were taken, how huge. So we have still, and if we want to have ammonia in the agriculture to be green, then we may need them more targeted for longer periods, right? So to get them competitive. And the other thing what we need is the carbon tax policy. We see that the willingness to pay from the demand sectors for green hydrogen, it grows immediately when you go up to 200 euros per ton taxes. So it's this combination of a carbon tax on the fossil alternatives combined with market penetration subsidies that will make sectors.
So this is a blended approach to regulation, but also market incentives to create a stable product that has a clear business plan, and then you let it fly.
And then you let it fly because you get then the gigafactories for electrolyzers to be built everywhere. Like we have gigafactories spreading now all over the globe for electric batteries. So that will then happen with at least my expectation was the penetration of electrolyzers. So we get the gigascale production of them, and not in a single, but in many companies do that, will get the cost down at least on the capex side of the project. And then the next thing will be combined with this cheap PV, and we can get to the. I made it too easy story with engineering. You may see a lot of more technical things, but at least from the regulation perspective, this will be my answer.
Some of this, I think we have, once we have a frame in the regulation, the problem when it comes from the implementation and the adoption of the rules is problems that were not predicted when the laws and regulations were designed. And I think they were not predicted some possible restrictions and obstacles because there was no interaction with all the sectors, and industrial, and the law, and the academia. I can give an example concerning the gigafactors. There are gigafactors of recycling for batteries design, but there is no regulation for supplying the feed to the plant, to the factory, because battery waste are considered dangerous, so there is no regulation for this. So we have been forced somehow from the directions to electrify, and then the waste have been produced and we need to recycle, but we didn't take into consideration and we didn't predict when it comes from the implementation, the real conditions, what is the case study. I think more interaction with the stakeholders. Yes.
My personal view, and I'm going to close the conference on that, is to say that regulations need to be holistic, understand the trade-offs and the synergies between them, between regulations that are relevant for different sectors, but also regulations within one sector. I'm a fan of the Draghi report, an omnibus, which is about making the European Green Deal and especially the directive on sustainable reporting more elegant and more efficient. Clarity and efficient simplicity is important for implementation, and our regulator should have that in mind if we are going to get anything implemented. Thank you so much, everybody, for your patience. We are always here to interact with all of you and learn from you and collaborate. Thank you. Is lunch? Okay, let's go to have something to eat and drink.